Li Shang remained silent. He was torn between whether to help Terumi Mei or join Orochimaru and assist in his tyranny. For now, let's leave it at that, Terumi Mei said, pursing her lips. After hesitating for a moment, she continued, Chojuro, inform Hazuki of the current situation. She didn't expect a 7-year-old child to come up with a solution. But she had already decided to train him, so she naturally had to start from a young age. Yes, Chojuro replied, stealing a glance at Terumi Mei and revealing a shy smile. However, Terumi Mei clearly had no interest in him and turned to leave. Ao followed suit. They sent an Anbu to test Obito, which might cause unnecessary trouble later, so they didn't have time for idle chatter. Let's go out and let him rest, Li Shang said, getting up and pushing open the door. The field of vision was filled with a faint mist. He remembered that his destination in the main world was London, a place inseparable from fog. As Chojuro walked and talked, he explained the current situation with Yagura. In fact, they had noticed Yagura's abnormality early on. Because Yagura was a perfect Jinchuriki, they never considered the possibility of him being controlled by Genjutsu. They just thought that as a new Mizukage, he was eager to prove himself. But it wasn't until the fire was about to consume Kirigakure that Terumi Mei and Ao finally realized the truth. In theory, a perfect Jinchuriki should not be affected by Genjutsu. It must be a case of two beings sharing one body, two types of chakra. So the reasonable explanation was that Obito used his Mangekyo Sharingan to control both Yagura and the tailed beast within him at the same time. Chojuro, help me investigate something, Li Shang said after listening, pondering for a moment. He planned to drive Obito away first before doing anything else. The reason was simple. He didn't like Obito. Plus, he could start over, so Li Shang naturally wanted to do as he pleased. What's the point of being a time traveler if you're not carefree and unrestrained? What is it? Chojuro asked. Currently, he was Terumi Mei's bodyguard and an Anbu member. Although he was shy, he had connections. Kisame Hoshigaki, Li Shang said, referring to the older brother of Kisame Samahata. He was one of the 7 members of the second batch of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, wielding the twin swords Haramekure, which Chojuro was currently carrying. Since the sword had been given to someone else, it meant that Kisame had already died. The original work did not mention the cause of Kisame's death. But Li Shang, who had been born into the Hoshigaki clan twice, had heard some rumors. Kisame died while pursuing the rogue ninja Hazuka. Hazuka was the Jinchuriki of the 6 tails and had defected because he believed his teacher was going to kill him. Li Zhang's goal was the summoning 7 ninja sword scroll in Kisame's possession. After his death, the scroll disappeared. It wasn't until it was brought back through impure world reincarnation that Kisame Hoshigaki obtained it. Help me find out where he died, Li Shang said. Due to various persecutions, there were only 3 members left in the Hoshigaki clan. That was why no one had gone looking for the scroll. Chojuro readily agreed. Li Shang had treated his injuries every time, so he had long wanted to find an opportunity to repay him. Investigating such a small matter was a piece of cake. And Li Shang had a reason too. They were from the same clan, so it was only natural to show some concern, right? Li Shang bid farewell to Chojuro and returned to the Hoshigaki clan's residence. Mizuki, skipping class again? Li Shang asked. Master. Master, Mizuki Hoshigaki stammered, shrinking his head. His original personality was impulsive and foul-mouthed, and he was cruel in battle, probably due to being called the reincarnation of the demon. After Zabuza Momochi's death in the original work, he inherited the decapitating carving knife. But he was just a brat, a good beating would do. After Li Shang taught him a lesson, he was left with a psychological shadow. It's because they're too weak, Mizuki said. Hazuka Suigetsu gathered up the courage to explain, there's not a single person in the whole school who can fight. Then how about fighting me? Li Shang smiled and asked. No, no, no. Hazuka Suigetsu quickly waved his hand, I can't beat you. When is your birthday? Li Shang remembered that Hazuka Suigetsu was 4 years old this year. Under normal circumstances, he would have been noticed by Orochimaru and taken to the hidden sound village when he was 5. 3 more months, Hazuka Suigetsu answered honestly. Li Shang raised an eyebrow at his response. He realized that he had overlooked something. Orochimaru selecting a genius and Obito controlling the Mizukage were likely to have happened around the same time. But he also discovered a blind spot. Why did Obito leave Kirigakure? Logically speaking, even if he was discovered, with his strength and borrowing members from the Akatsuki organization, suppressing Terumi Mei and others would not be a problem at all. Unless Obito didn't want to play anymore. After all, Kirigakure had already suffered heavy casualties. The bloodline limit clans and ninjas were almost completely wiped out. And after venting for so long, his anger had subsided, plus the situation with Konoha, he simply gave up on Kirigakure. For Li Shang, this was undoubtedly a good thing. If Obito insisted on holding onto the position, there was nothing he could do. Cousin, can I go now? Hazuka Suigetsu saw him lost in thought and didn't want to suffer any longer. Go ahead, Li Shang waved his hand. Hazuka Suigetsu slipped away immediately. If this guy knew he was about to be captured by Orochimaru for experiments, he probably wouldn't be able to laugh. Li Shang had experienced it once and didn't want to experience it again. Hazuka Suigetsu was locked in a narrow glass jar, left to be studied by a group of white-coated ninjas. This experience is really terrible. There isn't even a piece of clothing to cover up. Li Shang walked towards the training ground. The Hazuka clan possesses a rare water-style secret technique. The most famous one is the water transformation technique. It can turn the body into water, making it immune to physical attacks. Genuine water. It's just afraid of lightning-style ninjutsu. While he was practicing ninjutsu, Orochimaru licked his lips from a dark corner not far away. A rare genius. His favorite thing is to collect geniuses. Especially those with Kekkei Genkai and secret techniques. Because of Uchiha Madara, Orochimaru didn't encounter Uchiha Itachi, who joined the Akatsuki organization, nor was he killed by Genjutsu. At this time, he is not as obsessed with the Sharingan as in the original work. In addition, with Konoha flourishing, he naturally wants to continue to rely on the power of the Akatsuki organization. Last time he came to Kirigakure, he took Kimimaro with him. But unfortunately, he is sick, otherwise he would be the perfect vessel. And this time, Higashi Hazuki is his target. A new day. Chojuro brought the information Li Shang wanted. Thank you. Li Shang quickly locked onto a location. But he knew that relying solely on himself would be hopeless. So he plans to see how far the Akatsuki organization has developed. In the past, Li Shang left 3 scrolls for Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi. If they are obedient, they should have made arrangements in the Land of Water. Don't disappoint me. Li Shang found an opportunity and sneaked out. He didn't tell Terumi Mei, so she wouldn't send someone to protect him. Even though the situation in Kirigakure was extremely dire, business was still booming. Casinos, izakayas, and deals worth billions were happening every night, not suitable for children. Because they lived a life on the edge, the pressure was especially great for the shinobi. Ninjas were still human and needed to release their stress. Not everyone was like the members of the foundation cultivated by Danzo, devoid of sorrow or joy, like a stoic philosopher. After Li Shang used the transformation technique, he entered the largest casino in Kirigakure. He had previously instructed Shisui that establishing intelligence was particularly important. The Leaf Village's Anbu originally had spies in various villages, which happened to be useful. The only question was whether Tenbu had completed the layout. Li Shang went straight to the owner of the casino and said, Tenbu. He spoke in Chinese. Yes, the Tenbu organization encrypted their intelligence in Chinese. The bald middle-aged man's previously indifferent expression suddenly froze. He couldn't understand, but he had been trained in these peculiar syllables. Only the specialized intelligence group within Tenbu could understand the meaning behind them. Kid, you've got guts. Do you want to play big? Follow me. The middle-aged man showed a welcoming smile and turned to enter the room behind him. If you didn't know, you would think he was some kind of madam. Li Shang lifted the curtain and suddenly found himself surrounded by men. 2 burly men stared at him with eyes as wide as bronze bells, sizing him up. The atmosphere was extremely tense and dangerous. It seemed like they would draw their swords in the next second. Since you can speak this special language, it proves that you have a connection with Tenbu, but you are unfamiliar. You are not a member of the Mist Shinobi Division, the middle-aged man said expressionlessly. According to the rules, you need to state your password to confirm your identity. Li Shang was not surprised. He had set up 7 passwords for Tenbu. Only those who held the finger ring would know them all. Life and death, the cycle continues. Li Shang still spoke in Chinese. The middle-aged man's face changed slightly. This phrase was unfamiliar to him. Unfamiliarity meant that the man in front of him had a higher rank than himself. But whether he was or not would still have to be determined by the person in charge. Just stating the password was still not enough to confirm his identity. You guys can leave. The middle-aged man ordered the 2 men beside him to leave. He then took Li Shang out of the casino and quickly arrived at an izakaya. Leader. He stopped in front of a room on the 3rd floor. Come in. As the door opened, Li Shang saw the ninja who was speaking. He was tall, feeling over 2 meters in height. Black short hair, no eyebrows, a cross-shaped scar on his right cheek, and red stripes painted on the lower half of his face. His features were too distinctive. Even though they had never met, Li Shang still recognized the ninja in front of him. He was the former member of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen, the first owner of the Executioner's Blade, Kirasame Juzu. In the original story, he was dissatisfied with Yagura's bloody rule and defected to join the Akatsuki organization. His teammate was Uchiha Itachi, who later returned to Kirigakure to carry out a mission but died from the tailed beast bomb. Li Shang couldn't help but smile. So, it was him again, causing another butterfly effect. Without the Uchiha clan massacre, he indirectly influenced the fate of countless people. Why are you laughing? Kirasame Juzu looked at him as if he were looking at a dead man. A murderous intent filled the air. There was a setting in the Hokage's ninja that they emitted killing intent. Powerful individuals like Orochimaru could completely immobilize genin with their killing intent alone. I want you to help me find someone. Li Shang skipped his question and said. Kirasame Juzu's eyebrowless brow furrowed slightly. This guy was really confident. What is your password? Life and death, the cycle continues. Pai Ba Shizang immediately stood up, his fists clenched. What? Is my password incorrect? Li Shang saw his expression and was somewhat puzzled. Could it be that Shisui and Itachi changed his password? No, Pai Ba Shizang shook his head and said, because I rarely hear this password. To be more precise, it was the second time he heard it. The last time was from Uchiha Itachi. He encountered him after he defected from Kirigakure and was instantly killed. But Uchiha Itachi said that his strength was not bad, and if he joined Tendo, he would spare him. Pai Ba Shizang had already planned to find a force after leaving Kirigakure, so he readily agreed. According to the procedure, in order to prevent someone from accidentally overhearing the password, you also need to explain the meaning of this sentence. Pai Ba Shizang's attitude became much more respectful. Li Shang nodded, as the rules were set by him in the first place. The purpose was to ensure that even if the finger was lost, he could still borrow the power of Tendo. It means that life and death are constantly alternating and never ending. There's also my Q stack behind, you're dead. May I ask which of the 7 are you? Pai Ba Shizang took a deep breath. Uchiha Itachi left a great shadow on him. Otherwise, according to his character, he wouldn't be so humble. In addition, he assumed that all 7 managers of Tendo had the same strength as Uchiha Itachi. You don't need to know. Just help me find the body of Hazuka Mangetsu. Li Shang thought for a moment and said, although bringing Uchiha Itachi and Shisui here could announce the final outcome for Kirigakure, the risk was still considerable. Aside from his own clearance evaluation, it would be troublesome if it attracted Nagato's attention. Hazuka Mangetsu? As one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, Pai Ba Shizang naturally knew about this junior. He has been dead for almost 2 years, so it's highly likely that the body is no longer there. Ninja corpses have considerable value. If someone discovers it, they will definitely not miss the opportunity. In addition, accidents can also be caused by wild animals or weather. It's okay, just do your best. Li Shang waved his hand. Since Yakushi Kabuto was able to perform the impure world reincarnation on Hazuka Mangetsu and use the scroll, it proved that both his body and the scroll were still intact. One had to admit that this guy was quite skilled at grave robbing. Speaking of Yakushi Kabuto, Li Shang thought of a question. Did he follow Orochimaru? In the original story, he was a ninja from Konoha and worked for Danzo. But Danzo was not a good person. He forced Yakushi Kabuto to kill his foster mother, Yakushi no. So, in a state of despair, Yakushi Kabuto accepted Orochimaru's invitation and fled Konoha. Although the specific timeline was unknown, Yakushi Kabuto was still young. After all, Naruto and Sasuke were only 5 years old. If Danzo returned to the Pure Land in advance, this incident might not have happened. The chances of Yakushi Kabuto leaving Konoha would be greatly reduced. If that were the case, Li Shang would have a better chance of being valued by Orochimaru. Do you know Yakushi Kabuto? Li Shang looked at Pai Ba Shizang. After all, existing information should not be wasted. I do. I heard he is a medical genius from Konoha. Good information. Li Shang asked again. What about your decapitating carving knife? It's in the hands of Momochi Zabuza. Pai Ba Shizang flashed a hint of embarrassment and said, originally, I wanted to invite him to join Tendo, but unexpectedly, the decapitating carving knife lost to him. Where is he now? In the land of waves. Pai Ba Shizang thought that Li Shang was going to deal with Momochi Zabuza and said, I hope that the adult can return the decapitating carving knife to me when the time comes. Li Shang stayed at the izakaya for 3 days and played at the casino for 3 days as well. As the boss, Yakushi Kabuto provided him with funds and said that he could take away any money he won. But Li Shang lost everything. He couldn't help but complain that this guy lacked emotional intelligence. He should have arranged things with the casino in advance so that he could win and be happy. Anyway, Li Shang would never admit that he had bad luck. His lucky X was not fake after all. It must be said that there is strength in numbers. If Yakushi Kabuto could find the body of Hazuka Mangetsu, there was no reason why Tenma couldn't find it. Li Shang glanced around and picked up the scroll. As a member of the Hazuka clan, he had seen the specific contents in the records, so he quickly confirmed that this was what he wanted. Thank you. Li Shang also took the body with him. It wasn't because of any special preference. It was just that leaving Hazuka Mangetsu's body exposed in the wilderness was too heartless. Back in Kirigakure, Li Shang buried him. Although Hazuka Suigetsu was sad due to the cruel reality in recent years, he didn't cry bitterly. Even though he was only 4 years old, he had become accustomed to life and death. As Terumi Mei said, Kirigakure indeed had no future like this. A summoning scroll. Terumi Mei was first surprised, then angry. She stared at Li Shang and asked, "Why didn't you tell me and went out on your own?" "Because I wasn't sure if I could find it," Li Shang casually explained. The reason was weak, but fortunately, his identity didn't make people doubt him. In addition to being Terumi Mei's disciple, he was also the only heir of the Hazuka clan. It was not wrong for him to work hard to retrieve the family treasure. Kirigakure is very dangerous. Don't go out casually anymore. Your cousin is already a warning for you. You shouldn't follow in his footsteps. Terumi Mei earnestly advised. She was the one who least wanted to see Li Shang in trouble. At the age of 7, he already had this level of ability. He would definitely be the pillar of Kirigakure in the future. He was absolutely her precious darling. At this moment, she had already started thinking from the perspective of the Mizukage. It's a pity that this scroll is of no use, Terumi Mei sighed. Where could they find 7 Jonin to form the 7 ninja swordsmen now? They couldn't change their current predicament at all. It's not necessarily. Li Shang shook his head and said, "We can bring back Zabuza Momochi. He has already become a rogue ninja." Chojuro, who was standing beside them, mustered up the courage to interject. He was shy by nature and couldn't help but envy Li Shang and Terumi Mei's lively conversation. He became a rogue ninja because he wanted to assassinate the Mizukage. Li Shang reminded, "At that time, we didn't know that the Mizukage was being controlled. His intention was to end the chaos in the Bloody Mist." He remembered from the original story that although Zabuza Momochi left because of his failure, he continued to make money outside and prepared for a comeback. Unfortunately, he encountered Uzumaki Naruto, who was still a novice but destined to be the child of prophecy, and his 2 teammates. Although Zabuza fought against Ashura with his feet and Indra with his fists, and had a difficult battle with the future Hokage Kakashi, in the end, he left on a crane, leaving behind his deep friendship with Haku. If they could convince Zabuza, it would be like getting 2 for the price of 1. Terumi Mei fell into contemplation upon hearing this. She didn't have a good impression of rogue ninjas, but Zabuza Momochi did have his reasons, and at this moment, she needed strong individuals. Zabuza is no longer in the land of water. Terumi Mei thought of another problem. Who should go find him? She and Ao couldn't leave Kirigakure. Otherwise, if something happened to the Mizukage, they wouldn't be able to rush back. Only Chojuro. Terumi Mei subconsciously looked at him. Chojuro noticed her gaze and immediately lowered his head, not daring to meet her eyes. Terumi Mei felt uncomfortable. This kind of personality really wasn't suitable for being a ninja. Especially in Kirigakure, but she doesn't have a second person to use. Although Anbu ninjas are capable, they lack strength. Chojuro is able to wield the twin swords Haramekure because he is indeed worthy of inheriting the title of one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. "I'll go with him." Li Shang took the opportunity to speak up. No, Terumi Mei immediately refused. She would rather lose Chojuro than lose Li Shang. Medical ninjas are really scarce, and Li Zhang's skills are not low. Even in Konoha, he can be considered a genius. I am confident that I can persuade Zabuza, and with Chojuro, unless we encounter a strong enemy, there shouldn't be any problems. Li Shang smiled. I have some confidence in my persuasion skills. Terumi Mei rubbed her forehead in frustration. She felt like she was going through menopause before becoming Mizukage. But Li Shang is indeed eloquent, she has experienced it firsthand. Originally, Terumi Mei wanted to recruit Li Shang as a bodyguard, just like Chojuro, but ended up being persuaded and became his mentor. The most absurd thing is that she hasn't taught him any ninjutsu. Her lava style and boil style, Li Shang has yet to find a place to start. And the Hazuka clan possesses water-style secret techniques that can rival Kekkei Genkai. A fledgling bird will eventually grow up. Sensei, Li Shang shrugged and said, I've wanted to say this for a long time. You worry too much about Chojuro, and now you're starting to worry about me. From the original work, it can be seen that Terumi Mei always carries Chojuro wherever she goes. But with Chojuro's personality, he must be independent and his confidence must be cultivated. It's hard to change that by staying by Terumi Mei's side. Because Chojuro likes her, plus she is too outstanding and dominant, it will only worsen his inferiority complex. Terumi Mei-sama, it's not. Chojuro hesitated, wanting to retort. But when he became anxious, his mind went blank, and he didn't know what to say. Terumi Mei raised her hand and said, Haim said it right, spoiling someone won't help them grow. She looked at Li Shang with obvious admiration in her eyes. To be like this at the age of 7, what will it be like in another 8 or 10 years? It's really something to look forward to. Chojuro wanted to say something but noticed her expression. He felt a bit stimulated and said firmly, I will definitely protect Haim. This is the loudest you've ever said in front of me. Terumi Mei couldn't help but laugh. Chojuro immediately deflated, his face turning slightly red, his eyes scanning the ground as if there were gold there. You two should go early and come back early. Terumi Mei understood Chojuro's personality. If he could change so suddenly, it could only be possession. And the one who was truly possessed, Li Shang, nodded. Finally, the goal was achieved. Indeed, the strongest Kekkei Genkai is the power of persuasion. Even someone as dominant as Terumi Mei couldn't resist. After leaving Kirigakure, Zabuza became a wandering ninja, accepting any high-paying employment. Chojuro introduced the information about Anbu. He is currently in the Land of Waves. Why is that? Li Shang knew that in the original work, Zabuza was hired by a wealthy man named Gatu in the Land of Waves, and then encountered Kakashi's Team 7. But that was 6 years later. But it's quite miserable to not be able to gather enough funds to return to Kirigakure in 6 years. That's why you shouldn't be too much of a ninja. Zabuza is already a rogue ninja, but still follows the ninja code. Although it's to maintain his good reputation, why not do things secretly? Robbing Gatu, that's a quick way to make money. It seems like he was being pursued by a rogue ninja in the Land of Waves, Chojuro said. So he's doing bounty hunter work. Li Shang immediately thought of Kakuzu. Indeed, it's a fast way for ninjas to make money. Especially for confident and skilled ninjas. Li Shang easily found Zainobu and Bai. Apart from a few pirates that Chojuro took care of along the way, they didn't encounter any other troubles. What should we do now? Chojuro looked at the two of them and asked. He knew Zainobu's strength, so he kept his distance. Naturally, we should meet with them. Li Shang answered without hesitation. But Zainobu is an extremely ruthless guy. I'm worried that we won't even have time to speak before he starts chasing us with his sword. Chojuro seemed hesitant. He wasn't afraid of fighting Zainobu, but he was afraid that Li Shang would be killed and he wouldn't be able to report back to Terumi Mei. So he leaned towards a more gentle approach, rather than a direct one. Rumors are just rumors. If Zainobu was truly heartless and unprincipled, he wouldn't have adopted Bai. Li Shang understood what he meant, but the time left for us is running out. His argument was logical and irrefutable, but what convinced Chojuro was the second half of the sentence. He didn't believe that Zainobu was a good person. Adopting Bai was definitely just to cultivate a tool. I'll go ahead. Chojuro perfectly executed Terumi Mei's command. Although his personality was problematic, he was undoubtedly a qualified ninja. You should leave your teacher, Li Shang casually said. Huh. Chojuro instinctively looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Because if you stay by her side, you will always be submissive, and she won't like you. It can be seen from the original work that Terumi Mei likes men like Kakashi and Sasuke. Of course, being handsome is a prerequisite. Li Shang didn't have any intention of deceiving his teacher, so he distanced himself from Chojuro. Maybe one day it would come in handy. No, I don't like. Chojuro immediately started to refute, but he couldn't say that he didn't like her, so he ended up feeling embarrassed. Who are you? Zainobu and Bai noticed their approach. Chojuro, who was also on guard, couldn't care less about being shy. It's been a long time since I've encountered mist ninjas coming to capture me. Zainobu saw the forehead protectors on their bodies and recognized the dual swords Chojuro was carrying. He showed a cruel smile, gripped his decapitation sword, and said, "It's a good warm-up. Bai, I'll leave that brat to you." Chojuro immediately drew his place, and with the corner of his eye, he glanced at Li Shang. It seemed like he was saying, I knew it would end up like this. Our purpose in coming here is not to capture you, but to invite you back to become the Mizukage. Li Zhang's tone was very calm, but the three people present were all shocked. Chojiro tried to signal with his eyes that something was wrong with this situation. Zainobu was momentarily stunned and angrily said, Are you joking with me? He hadn't been away from Kirigakure for a particularly long time, so he was aware of the situation in the village. Becoming the Mizukage was indeed his goal, but it was not something he could achieve on his own. Because Terumi Mei was more popular, and she had the support of the elders. So according to the normal procedure, it would be difficult for Zainobu to become the Mizukage. I didn't come all this way to joke with you. If you miss this opportunity today, you won't have another chance. By then, you will become the catalyst for Team 7, contributing your own strength to the growth of Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. It can be said that you will die a great death. Zainobu heard the contempt in his words and coldly said, Even without you, I will return to Kirigakure one day. Becoming the Mizukage is not about fighting and killing, but about social skills. Li Shang shook his head and said, You will never be able to become the Mizukage. After saying that, he leapt forward. The decapitation sword plunged straight into the spot where Zainobu had just stood. Chojiro cursed himself silently and quickly stood in front of Li Shang. He apologized, saying, I'm sorry, I was a bit distracted just now. It's okay, I understand. Li Shang replied, then looked at Zainobu and said, Anger will never make you the Mizukage. With a loud sound, the decapitation sword clashed with the place. Kid, I'm going to chop off your head. Zai Biyuzan was already a hot-tempered person, and being provoked by Li Shang made him extremely angry. I was furious, but Choju Lang was not someone he could easily deal with. Look at your current performance. Li Shang continued to attack. It was impossible to have a calm and peaceful conversation with Zai Biyuzan. In that case, let's fight first. Only Choju Lang had a worried expression on his face. He wasn't confident that he could defeat Zai Biyuzan. Kill him. Zai Biyuzan finally remembered his tool. Bai walked up to Li Shang and said softly, I'm sorry, but you must die. A gentle voice spoke coldly, but Li Shang understood that he was a gentle ninja. Follow me. Li Shang turned around and ran. His speed was extremely fast. Bai was slightly startled and quickly followed. Choju Lang saw this and had a somewhat anxious expression, but there was nothing he could do. Your name is Bai, right? Li Shang stopped and introduced himself, saying, Hajiri Guren. What kind of person are you? Bai felt puzzled. I want to kill you, shouldn't your reaction be more intense? He had been taught by Zai Biyuzan and had killed many people, but Li Shang was the strangest person he had ever seen. I can see people very accurately. Li Shang smiled and said, You don't want to kill, but you willingly accept Zai Biyuzan's orders, even if it goes against your own will. In the original work, Bai was an extremely kind-hearted ninja who disliked killing. But because of his tragic experience and being saved by Zai Biyuzan, he felt needed and had the motivation to survive. Even if he was treated as a killing tool, because I am Zai Biyuzan's tool. Bai said expressionlessly, I exist because of him. An expected answer. Tools don't have emotions, but you do. Li Shang shook his head. Bai fell silent for a moment and said, I only have the feeling of protecting Zai Biyuzan. Alright, let's just leave it at that. Li Shang thought for a moment and said, If one day Zai Biyuzan orders you to leave, what would you do? That won't happen. Bai said as if convincing himself, because I am useful to him. For him, the thing he feared the most was being abandoned. If Zai Biyuzan is about to die, and you can save him, but he doesn't let you, what would you do? That's even more impossible. Bai didn't hesitate this time and answered quickly, Zai Biyuzan wouldn't care about me. He would sacrifice me to save himself, he definitely wouldn't hesitate. Are you sure? Li Shang asked in return. I told you, I can see people very accurately. Do you believe that Zai Biyuzan is the person in this world who cares about you the most? Bai trembled. He obviously didn't believe it, but he hoped it was true. Do you want to try? Li Shang mentioned his purpose for coming this time. We found out that the Mizukage of Kirigakure is being controlled, so we hope Zai Biyuzan can go back and help us. You're saying that him being the Mizukage is a lie? Bai was still more concerned about Zai Biyuzan. No, as long as the control over the Mizukage is lifted, the next Mizukage might be on the agenda. As someone who has made great contributions, Zai Biyuzan is qualified to compete for the position of Mizukage. Li Shang smiled and asked, Don't you believe that he can defeat the other competitors? I naturally believe. Bai said without hesitation. Then do you want to know how he really sees you? Just as a tool? Li Shang pointed in the direction of the battle and said, Zai Bi Yuzan can't listen to anything right now, but you can make him calm down. I don't believe your speculation. Bai fell silent for a moment and said, but I want to know if it's true or not. Kirigakure is a bloody epitome of misery. He was born in a snowy village and inherited his mother's ice release. But the villagers despised and feared Keke Genke. When his father discovered his mother's ice release, he led the villagers to kill her. When they were about to kill him, he used his ice release to fight back. Overnight, he became an orphan and wandered around the water country, eventually meeting Zabuza. Perhaps, no matter who it is, as long as they extend a helping hand to him, he is willing to repay them with his remaining life. In such circumstances, maintaining the necessary kindness is undoubtedly commendable. The only thing that is terrible is the tragic state of the world. Wait, no matter what happens, don't come out. Li Shang cautioned. White nodded silently. He knew Zabuza's ambition very well. If what Li Shang said was true, this was undoubtedly a great opportunity. He also didn't want to see Zabuza assassinate the Mizukage again. This method is the most dangerous, but White was also prepared. If he was deceived, he would kill Li Shang. Don't worry, I really want to invite Zabuza back to Kirigakure. Li Shang smiled and said, I'm not worried. White replied. There was still no expression on his face. Li Shang didn't expose him and walked towards the sparkling Zabuza and Haku. As mist shinobi, they were both skilled in silent assassination techniques, so they didn't use the mist to assassinate. They openly competed in swordsmanship and ninjutsu. Li Zhang's gaze shifted between the two of them. Haku was at a disadvantage. He was young, inexperienced, and not ruthless enough. Hyuki. Haku noticed Li Shang first. Zabuza should have taken advantage of the moment when Haku was distracted to launch a surprise attack, but he didn't see White and his heart trembled. Where's White? Can you see me? Don't you understand? Li Shang retorted. This useless guy. Zabuza cursed angrily. The veins on his arm holding the decapitating sword bulged, and the killing intent in the air became extremely strong. Li Shang sensed his true emotions. No matter how ruthless a man is, there is always a warm side. No matter how useless he is still my person. If you kill him, you will bury him with him. Zabuza leapt forward, and the decapitating sword whistled down towards Li Zhang's head. Who told you he's already dead? Li Shang remained fearless in the face of danger. But he didn't pretend to be this guy. Haku crossed his dual blades in front of him. Zabuza suddenly heard this news. The decapitating sword lost its follow-up attack, and he took a few steps back from the powerful force. After stabilizing himself, he asked, Where's White? Haku didn't quite understand the current situation. He glanced at Li Shang and simply guarded him to prevent Zabuza from launching a surprise attack. Do you care about him? Li Shang didn't answer his question. He's just a tool to me, not worth caring about. Zabuza said coldly, but he's somewhat useful. A man who says one thing but means another. Li Shang smiled faintly and asked, If that's the case, why do you need to know where he is? Zabuza became inexplicably angry and said, I'll knock out your teeth one by one. Speaking of which, White and you are completely different kinds of people. Li Shang ignored his threat and said, But he is loyal to you. Zabuza fell silent but raised the decapitating sword again. He certainly knows Bai's true character, which is completely different from his own. But he is not capable of compromising. Gaara never succumbs to threats. Unless he is given too much money, then he can tolerate it temporarily. Do you have no other means besides fighting? Li Shang sighed and said, I remember your wish was to end the chaos in Kirigakure, but you yourself are in chaos. Have you really thought about what you should do after becoming Mizukage? Gaara found it strange. A 7-year-old child lecturing him. And what the child said seemed to make sense. At least most ninjas couldn't have such insights. Thinking of Bai, Gaara ultimately didn't make a move. He said, as long as I am strong enough, these are not problems. A typical mindset of the strong. In a sense, it's not wrong, but it cannot bring lasting peace. Just like how Uzumaki Naruto convinced everyone with a so-called dream and his fists. But in the end, it was only temporary. In Boruto, even Kurama was forced to disappear. Although it's partly the fault of the author, Uzumaki Naruto indeed did not achieve true peace. But I have to remind you, you don't have the qualification to discuss this matter with me from the perspective of strength. Li Shang said with emphasis, if you were strong enough, you should be stepping on my head right now. Seeing Gaara's angry eyes again, Li Shang calmly took out a summoning scroll for a ninja sword. You should know what this scroll is. Kirigakure intends to rebuild the 7 ninja swordsmen, and if you come back, you have the opportunity to become Mizukage. You can also practice your ideals, defeat all competitors, and prove your strength. Gaara remained silent. Although he was hot-tempered, irritable, and ruthless, he wasn't a fool. Moreover, his weakness, Bai, was being held by someone, making it rare for him to listen to others. What Li Shang said undoubtedly reminded him of the path he once wanted to take. But controlled by the manipulated Yagura, he could only resort to the most violent means. What about the current Mizukage? Gaara thought of the key question. Clearly, the Mizukage is still there, so why is everyone thinking about seizing power? I believe you still possess the honor of Kirigakure ninjas, so I'm telling you this. The Mizukage has been controlled since a long time ago. What? Even with Gaara's temperament, it was difficult for him to be astonished upon hearing this truth. It was truly unbelievable. Such a thing has never happened in the ninja world. The 5 most powerful Kage being controlled, it's simply outrageous. I invite you to come back because I want to resolve this matter and completely end the blood mist. Li Zhang's words reminded Gaara of his original intention. The purpose of his wandering and taking on missions in various countries was for this, right? Seeing that he was somewhat moved, Li Shang let Bai come out. Bai lowered his head and seemed a bit afraid to meet Gaara's gaze. His actions were more like a betrayal. Gaara glanced at him, relieved to see that he had no injuries. He said, "Prepare yourself and come back to Kirigakure with me. This time, the Mizukage will definitely be mine." Bai immediately looked delighted. "But I won't forget about your collusion with outsiders." Gaara coldly snorted and said, "The punishment you deserve cannot be less." Bai smiled. Not far away, Chojuro scratched his head and asked, "Why'd I feel that something is off with those two?" "Is that so?" Li Shang sighed. "If you had half of Bai's beauty and courage, maybe there would be hope for you and the teacher." Chojuro suddenly realized and was greatly shocked. Li Shang remembered the debate in his previous life about whether Bai was male or female. Later, his friend, after being beaten by society, had a great realization and said, "Isn't it better if Bai is male?" Ahem. Back to the main topic. Resolving the matter between Gaara and Bai, the gap with Obito has reached an acceptable level. Li Shang needs to think about how to leave a deep impression on this guy. When they returned, the 4 of them rented a boat. As per Li Zhang's request, they all disguised themselves. They wore white kimonos, looking extremely elegant. Chong Jiro had the appearance of someone who had never seen the world before, and he stole glances several times. After arriving in Kirigakure, the 4 of them avoided attention and sneaked into Terumi Mei's house. The main reason was to prevent Zabuza and Haku from being detected by Obito, so as to avoid any other complications. When Terumi Mei opened the door and saw the 4 of them, her gaze lingered on Li Shang. She was surprised that Zabuza had been convinced in just a few days. Including the process, the conversation probably didn't exceed 2 or 3 hours. This kind of efficiency was astonishing. It was also the first time she truly understood the saying, "Words are more powerful than fists." "Zabuza, long time no see." Terumi Mei smiled faintly, facing Zabuza's expression that kept people at a distance. She didn't lose her momentum. Zabuza nodded and said, "You need to understand, I came back to compete for the position of Mizukage." Straightforward. Just like his decapitation sword. Big, direct, and hard. Terumi Mei was slightly taken aback by his straightforwardness. But this kind of quick attack was refreshing. She liked talking to people like him. Terumi Mei glanced at Li Shang and probably guessed what he had said to persuade Zabuza to come back. She didn't blame him in her heart, but instead felt that Li Shang was bold, intelligent, and knew how to hit the nail on the head. Without a doubt, he was a good candidate for Mizukage. As for Zabuza, he didn't have the strength to suppress everything, and his personality was not suitable for Mizukage, only suitable for charging into battle. The Mizukage should be someone capable. Terumi Mei said without concern, "If you have the ability, I will be your assistant." Zabuza fell silent for 2 seconds. He knew that in their first encounter, he had been completely defeated in terms of mentality. Not an ordinary woman. When he was in Kirigakure, although he knew of Terumi Mei's reputation, they didn't have much interaction. Because in his opinion, the only correct answer was the sword in his hand, not compromising. Zabuza thought of Li Zhang's soul-searching yesterday. He admitted that he was indeed not prepared to become Mizukage. "This is Bai, right?" Terumi Mei looked him up and down, a beautiful young man. And according to her investigation, Bai was undoubtedly a super genius. He possessed the rare bloodline limit of ice release in Kirigakure and was only 8 years old. Terumi Mei-sama. Bai responded, "Now that you've come back, Kirigakure will be your new home." Terumi Mei reached out her hand and said, "And like you, your past won't happen again." A mist appeared in the palm of her hand. a sizzling sound. The strong corrosiveness caused the air to melt. Bai's body trembled. This was a bloodline limit. Instantly, his gaze towards Terumi Mei softened. He thought, she's a good person. Zabuza pursed his lips. This woman is really good at stirring up trouble. Clearly, I was the one who came first. Although he wasn't worried about Bai betraying them, it made him seem incompetent, didn't it? When do we start? Zabuza changed the topic. In a few days. With your participation, we already have a chance of winning. Terumi Mei explained her plan. Ao will use the Byakugan to break Mizukage-sama's control, and then he will assist us. Li Shang raised an eyebrow. He had forgotten about Yagura, the Jinchuriki. Although it sounded ridiculous that the Byakugan could break the Mangekyo Sharingan's Genjutsu, that was how it was in the original story. If there was a betrayal by the Jinchuriki, there shouldn't be a problem. Li Shang blinked his eyes. Since Obito was leaving, it was only right to give him a small gift, both emotionally and logically. Okay. There's nothing more to say. Chong-jiro, arrange accommodations for them. Terumi Mei ordered. Chong-jiro immediately left with Zangetsu and Byakuya, leaving only Li Shang behind. You really are a disciple who constantly surprises people. With no outsiders present, Terumi Mei seemed much more casual. She stretched lazily and said, I want to give you a new position, Mizukage's advisor, how about it? Not really. Li Shang thought to himself, I'm only 7 years old, and I'm an undercover agent. I would rather establish a hospital in Kirigakure. A hospital will definitely be established. Terumi Mei frowned and said, but it would be a waste of your abilities to be stuck in a hospital. Let's talk about it later, I'm still a child. Li Shang turned to Zangetsu and said, I convinced Zangetsu to compete for Mizukage, is that okay? It's not a big deal. Terumi Mei smiled and said, if he wants to be Mizukage, he has to pass my test first, but I doubt he has the ability. Haki, show yourself. Li Shang raised his thumb and said. You talk too much. Terumi Mei waved her hand and said, since you have the summoning scroll, find the other swords and see who can inherit them. I have a candidate, Hazuka Juzo. Li Shang explained, Zangetsu's decapitation sword was stolen from him, but he didn't die. Terumi Mei's eyes lit up involuntarily. This was undoubtedly good news. Even though Hazuka Juzo was weak, he was still a jonin, and for the current Kirigakure, he would definitely be a huge help. Where is he now? Shimotsuki Island. Li Shang casually mentioned a place, not far from Kirigakure, let me go this time. Terumi Mei undoubtedly had her reasons. Zangetsu had performed excellently in his mission. There was no reason to change personnel. After Li Shang left, he went to the same izakaya as last time. Greetings, sir. Hazuka Juzo's attitude remained the same. Li Shang nodded slightly and was about to speak when he heard him ask, because you used the highest command, I reported it to headquarters, and they asked me a question. What is your finger ring code? Billa. Li Shang had anticipated this. Hazuka Juzo's body trembled, and without further questioning, he said, what can I do for you this time? Li Shang didn't speak, but took out the scroll and started pouring out the blades. There were only 3. Dull blade, Dugeki, exploding blade, Haimatsu, long blade, Hausen. Choose one. Li Shang tried summoning the other 4, but it didn't work. Probably because they already had owners and couldn't be summoned. Otherwise, Higetsu Suigetsu wouldn't have been running around collecting ninja swords. Why isn't there the decapitation sword? Hazuka Juzo couldn't help but ask. It's in Zangetsu's hands. If you want to rejoin the 7 ninja swordsmen, you'll have to choose another one. Are you saying? Hazuka Juzo was somewhat surprised. He thought he would never return to Kirigakure in his lifetime. Kirigakure is about to undergo a huge change. If you become one of the 7 ninja swordsmen, it will be more advantageous for Tendo. I see. Hazuka Juzo immediately understood Li Zhang's meaning. Tendo had always wanted to infiltrate the upper echelons of Kirigakure, but it was impossible as long as the Mizukage was under control. Now that the 7 ninja swordsmen were being rebuilt, it was a perfect opportunity. He just didn't know who this person was, who knew such information. Hazuka Juzo picked up the exploding blade, Haimatsu. This blade was similar in size to the decapitation sword, so it suited him. Li Shang doesn't like the 7 blades of the mist. It doesn't fit his aesthetic, he prefers the katana. In the world of shinobi, in his past life, he liked the Tang sword and the Han sword. Because he found them exceptionally beautiful. Li Shang put away the remaining 2 blades. The blunt blade Dugeki is a shinobi tool with a rope connecting a knife on one side and a hammer on the other. The long blade sewing needle is an enlarged sewing needle that makes Li Shang feel like an old woman. In short, they are 2 unconventional weapons. In fact, Li Shang had a speculation long ago. Is it possible that most of the 7 blades of the mist are just for show? The only truly magical one is Samahata, probably because 7 is a magical number. Tomorrow, go to Kirigakure and find Terumi Mei. Li Shang instructed, hide your identity before meeting her. Although he revealed his codename, Bai Luo, he is not ready to reveal himself yet. The first reason is that he doesn't have his finger protector with him. The second reason is that he wants to complete his clearance mission and find a way to contact Orochimaru. Trivial matters can be handled by Tenju, but when it comes to simulated evaluations, he can't afford to be careless. I understand. Even if Piba Juzo doesn't understand, he still needs to make it clear. After seeing Li Shang off, he turned and entered a secret room. According to headquarters orders, if it's Bai Luo, he must immediately report back. What Piba Juzo doesn't know is that the person who possesses Bai Luo has been missing for a long time. Li Shang returned to Kirigakure. He already had an idea of Obito's farewell gift. It wasn't anything grand, just a secretly slipped letter. To scare him away, Li Shang didn't want Obito to intensify his actions due to Kirigakure's resistance and bring members of Akatsuki over. Although Nagato probably wouldn't let him go too far. At this time, Akatsuki should be focused on making money, and even the plan to capture the tailed beasts hasn't been launched. Although Gyuki Yagura is under control, he still has Anbu protection. Li Shang obtained an Anbu identity from Ao. Ao is the leader of the Anbu, and he readily agreed to the request without even asking for a reason. As Terumi Mei's disciple, Li Shang was able to convince Zabuza Momochi and Piba Juzo one after another, so having an Anbu identity was nothing. Without a doubt, Ao already sees him as the successor to Mizukage, just like Chojuro. Compared to Chojuro's personality, he is more willing to invest in Li Shang. 3 years, another 3 years, and I'll become the boss. Li Shang casually complained. It's obviously easier to rise to power in Kirigakure than in Konoha village. If you're handsome, you can even become the riding position. Li Shang, dressed in Anbu attire, secretly placed a letter in Gyuki Yagura's office. The next day, Obito saw the letter. Or more accurately, it was handed to him by Gyuki Yagura. He only glanced at it, and his body trembled. The envelope didn't contain a long message, just a drawing. It depicted him and Rin Nohara, and it was from when they had just graduated. Instantly, he had a feeling of being haunted. No one besides Black Zetsu and Uchiha Madara could possibly know his true identity. Where did you get this letter from? Obito asked with a dark expression. I found it on the desk. Gyuki Yagura answered expressionlessly. I don't know who put it there. Obito instinctively tightened his grip on the photo. A strange feeling surged within him. He felt that these past 2 years had been extremely unlucky. First, he was taught a lesson by Uchiha Itachi in Konoha, and now he encountered such a warning in Kirigakure, which he had controlled for many years. Yes, in his opinion, it was a silent warning. His brows furrowed as he noticed a line of words after the photo. When you try to manipulate others, you are also being manipulated. Obito suddenly felt a chilling sensation, but quickly, he sneered and said, playing tricks. He burned the photo and fell into silence for a moment, but the gloom in his heart couldn't be dispelled. Who is this person exactly? The sound of knocking on the door. Orochimaru walked in and said, I plan to leave in 2 days, but I want to take Higurashi Hyuki with me. Whatever. Obito didn't even look at him. He wasn't in the mood. Orochimaru licked his lips. If he wasn't unsure, he would have made a move already. Unfortunately, this guy has a space-time ninjutsu, so he can't catch him. Orochimaru doesn't know about Mangekyo Sharingan, so he thinks it's space-time ninjutsu, not dojutsu. If he knew the truth, he would be even more covetous of the Sharingan. Originally, Obito was going to join Akatsuki as Aoi after the death of the Red Sand Scorpion, but because he was frustrated in Konoha, he planned to manipulate Nagato earlier and go to Konoha to carry rice. And Orochimaru went to Kirigakure. One was to meet his new teammate Hoshigaki Kisame, and the other was because he found Kimimaro, so he wanted to take advantage of it. At the same time, Li Shang was playing cards with Chojuro and Ibushi Juzo. Because they were bored, they were waiting for Terumi Mei's orders. Li Shang thought about it and decided to play cards. Zabuza was completely disdainful, and Haku naturally wouldn't join. Chojuro, hesitation leads to defeat. The longer you think, the worse it might be. A2. Chojuro gritted his teeth and said, pass. Li Shang waved his hand. Chojuro immediately breathed a sigh of relief and played 3 cards with a 3 and a 4. Follow. Li Shang smirked, played 3 cards with a 4 and a 3, and then ended with a pair. It was simply perfect. Chojuro immediately became dejected. Chojuro, today I will teach you a lesson. When playing cards, you should play with a smile. Li Shang happily accepted his 1002. Just then, Terumi Mei walked in. Chojuro immediately stood up and instinctively hid the cards in his hand. Just like a student peeking at black stockings during class and being caught by the teacher. Li Shang, on the other hand, remained completely calm. Terumi Mei said helplessly, Chojuro, learn from Hiyuki more. Chojuro nodded hesitantly. Forget it, let's get back to business. Prepare yourselves. Terumi Mei said decisively, success or failure lies in tonight. They didn't want to wait any longer. For Kirigakure, if the Mizukage is controlled for even a minute, it is a minute of shame. If it gets out, it will surely be a disgrace. If Li Shang knew her thoughts, he would comfort her and say that Gozu Yagura is not the most embarrassing cage. The setting sun hung in the sky. Ao and Terumi Mei paid their respects to Gozu Yagura. What's the matter? Gozu Yagura looked like a teenager from the outside, but in reality, he was already a grandfather. His rare green hair seemed to reflect his current situation. Ao looked up, took off his eye patch, and activated his Byakugan. His invisible eye power quickly expanded. Obito, who was hiding in the dark, suddenly trembled. Not good. He felt that Gozu Yagura had broken free from his control. In the next moment, the Mizukage's building collapsed with a bang. 3 thick tails covered in spikes attacked him at an extremely fast speed. A vast amount of chakra filled the surroundings. It was enough to show Gozu Yagura's anger. Water style, great dam repair. Everyone present was skilled and reacted quickly. Hoshigaki Kisame jumped into the air and spat out a sea. Hiyuki, step back. Terumi Mei formed hand seals with both hands and sprayed a large amount of corrosive acid from her mouth, effortlessly piercing through the water waves and enveloping Hoshigaki Kisame. She's a dangerous woman. No one can withstand a bite. Perhaps this is also one of the reasons why she can't find a boyfriend. Li Shang wisely stayed away. In Li Zhang's opinion, among the 7 members of the previous shinobi swordsmen, Hoshigaki Kisame's strength undoubtedly ranked in the top 3. Or perhaps even the strongest, which is also reasonable. In addition to water style and samahata, Hoshigaki Kisame naturally possessed an extremely vast amount of chakra. He was known as the tailed beast without a tail. Because of this, he didn't need to consider the consumption of his own chakra, and every ninjutsu he used could reach its maximum power. After all, the power of ninjutsu doesn't solely depend on its rank. For example, Uchiha Madara's great fireball technique is comparable to an S-rank ninjutsu. Hoshigaki Kisame's powerful water style caused the already ruined Mizukage building to be submerged in the ocean. The rest of the battles were also intense. Obito had no pressure dealing with Yagura, and even had the leisure to share the pressure with Orochimaru. He occasionally threw a fire-style ninjutsu at Chojuro, Zabuza, and Momochi. The scene was both fiery and chaotic, but a balance was formed in a short period of time. At this moment, Orochimaru bit his thumb and pressed it against the water's surface. Waves surged into the sky, reaching over dozens of meters. Li Shang couldn't dodge in time and was drenched. The others were the same. Fortunately, Terumi Mei had previously evacuated the residents near the Mizukage building and instructed them not to come over no matter what happened. A giant snake embroidered with purple stripes appeared. Its size far exceeded the half-tailed beast transformation of Yagura. It was Orochimaru's strongest summoning beast, Manda. What an annoying environment, Orochimaru, I want 100 people. The first thing Manda did after appearing was not to attack, but to negotiate. Orochimaru casually nodded, he was already used to it. Manda rushed at an extremely fast speed like a surfboard, reaching Zabuza's front. Its mountain-like body did not affect its speed. Zabuza swung his decapitating sword towards its triangular head. But it was shaken away by a tremendous force, and his body crashed into the water, creating a splash. Manda opened its blood-filled mouth, aiming directly at Zabuza's falling position. Momochi Shitaro trembled in his exploding blade, foam exploded. Scrolls filled with explosive tags flew out from the blade. That was the characteristic of this blade. Although it was called a shinobi sword, its true power lay in the explosive tags. Similar to Deidara, they believed that explosions were art. The explosive tags ignited instantly. A violent explosion rose into a mushroom cloud on the water's surface. The clash of water and fire suddenly filled the air with smoke. The sudden change in the environment undoubtedly favored the Kirigakure ninja. Zabuza disappeared into the mist. His speed was even faster than before. In the blink of an eye, his decapitating sword cut Orochimaru's body in half. But the expected blood did not appear. Zabuza was slightly stunned, immediately hiding in the mist again. The next moment, Manda's snake tail fell. Because of its size, its range was wide. Zabuza was directly smashed out. Immediately, countless mud-colored lion majesties appeared around him. Chojiro's flounder emitted a glow, gathering chakra, and instantly exploded into a ball of light. The light pierced through the lion majesties. Blood merged with the water, instantly creating a pool of blood. Zabuza didn't have time to express his gratitude and quickly jumped away. Most ninjas are helpless against giant-tailed beasts or summoning beasts due to their massive size. Because ordinary ninjutsu and physical attacks are difficult to break through their defenses. And ninjas have high attack and low defense. As time goes on, the probability of losing naturally increases. Li Shang, who was watching from a distance, couldn't help but frown. Although he didn't really care about summoning beasts, he had to admit that it was really difficult to deal with them until a certain level. However, everyone present was a top-notch powerhouse, so dealing with Amanda shouldn't be impossible. But there was still Orochimaru. Yagura, also known as Yagura of the Waterfall, realized the problem at hand. With a tremendous shock, the complete form of the three tails appeared completely before their eyes. Its appearance resembled that of a turtle, but covered in spikes. Because Yagura was a perfect Jinchuriki, he did not lose consciousness at this moment. And the large sea created by Kisame Hoshigaki also greatly helped him. The three tails instantly accelerated and bit down on the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Blood splattered without restraint. Painful screams resounded. The 7 swordsmen desperately tried to break free. The 2 colossal creatures clashed, causing a tsunami. Orochimaru and the others had to temporarily stop. Li Shang also ran further away. With his vision, he could no longer see the situation at the center of the battle. He didn't know how it was in the original work, but now it was undoubtedly a fierce battle. Li Shang could consider it as watching a VR action movie up close. Just then, his body suddenly stiffened. Orochimaru, who was supposed to be at the Mizukage's building, appeared in front of him. Kigetsu Higetsu. Orochimaru licked his tongue and said, "Are you interested in leaving with me?" Hey, Uncle Snake, oh no, Aunt Snake, what about your mouth technique? Don't I deserve a few more words from you? Li Shang remembered how Orochimaru recruited Kimimaro and others, always speaking so persuasively, on par with his eloquence and talent. But this also proved that Orochimaru was in a hurry now and had no mood for rhetoric. The three tails unleashed its full power, and Obito had already planned to retreat, no longer entangling with Kirigakure. Li Shang blinked. Should I symbolically resist, or should I yield to Aunt Snake? Orochimaru tilted his head, and Li Zhang's lack of response seemed a bit bewildered to him. After all, he was just a 7-year-old child. Just as he was about to make a move, suddenly a person appeared between him and Li Shang. All Li Shang saw was his back, a familiar symbol. The Uchiha fan. It was Uchiha Itachi who came. You're a ninja from Konoha. Orochimaru was stunned. He had never seen Uchiha Itachi before, but the Konoha forehead protector and ninja attire on him were quite familiar. Orochimaru. Uchiha Itachi glanced at his Akatsuki uniform and calmly said, "It seems my luck is good." Orochimaru's face turned cold. This attitude made him feel slighted. Even in Akatsuki, no one dared to ignore him. "It is indeed your luck to die by my hands." 2 giant snakes flew out from Orochimaru's sleeve, like vines, tightly entangling Uchiha Itachi from head to toe. Uchiha Itachi made no movement and calmly looked up at him. Orochimaru's body trembled, and only those scarlet eyes remained in his line of sight. It was the Sharingan. He realized it was not good and instinctively closed his eyes. But it was already too late. Everything around turned blood red. His body was pierced by wooden wedges. In the next moment, unimaginable pain spread through his limbs. Orochimaru realized that he was under a genjutsu and quickly shouted, "Genjutsu release." But it was useless. Release, release, release. Orochimaru showed an incredulous expression and said, "Why can't I release it? This is impossible." This emotion was just like when Li Shang couldn't solve a calculus problem. Unable to solve it all along, in the end, he could only write a bare solution on it. But Orochimaru's situation was even more miserable. Because he himself was an all-around ninja, his proficiency in genjutsu was enough to be called a genjutsu master. But unfortunately, his abilities were no match for the natural talent of others. The Mangekyo Sharingan was not something that could be surpassed through effort. It's useless. With your strength, you can't possibly dispel my illusion. Uchiha Itachi's voice had no emotional fluctuations. It was as if he was facing not one of the legendary Sannin, but an ordinary genin. Orochimaru exuded a gloomy aura all over his body. His expression was extremely ugly. He had always pursued immortality and mastering all ninjutsu. Uchiha Itachi's words were an unprecedented insult to him. The thing that Orochimaru took pride in seemed to have no effect in front of him. Even though he had the curse mark as a last resort and was not afraid of death. He understood that his strength was far inferior to Uchiha Itachi. Those eyes were definitely not ordinary Sharingan. A glimmer of light flashed in Orochimaru's snake-like pupils. It was possible for him to obtain it. Just then, he suddenly noticed that the pain in his body had greatly diminished. A painting emerged in the blood-red illusionary world. The painting depicted a boy of about 10 years old. Surprisingly, it was Uchiha Shisui. After receiving information from Ibiki Morino, Uchiha Itachi arrived in Kirigakure in just over a day. He even used Susanoo. Uchiha Shisui's disappearance had thrown him and Shisui into chaos. Now that he had received news about him, he absolutely couldn't miss it. "Have you seen this person in Kirigakure?" Uchiha Itachi's tone still sounded calm. Orochimaru looked at it, feeling very unfamiliar. According to his memory, if he had seen him, it would be impossible to forget. Who exactly was this person? To make Uchiha Itachi rush from Konoha to Kirigakure. Orochimaru licked his lips and asked, "I have seen him. Do you want to know where he is?" He planned to obtain some useful information. But Uchiha Itachi's reaction was completely different from what he had imagined. Orochimaru instantly lost consciousness. A few seconds later, he woke up and let out a scream. Flames were burning his internal organs. An unimaginable desire appeared in his eyes. With his intelligence, he naturally knew what had just happened. He was actually being controlled, and he had no ability to resist. What kind of power did those eyes possess? At this moment, Orochimaru was not afraid, but rather excited to see the new world. At the same time, outside, Li Shang took a deep breath. Orochimaru was screaming like a slaughtered pig. It would be troublesome if he died. Although he could be resurrected, it would still take time. Fortunately, Uchiha Itachi didn't know about the living corpse reincarnation. Otherwise, if he sealed Orochimaru with a 10-fist sword, Orochimaru would have nowhere to cry. Li Shang gritted his teeth. The current situation was very dangerous, but it was also an opportunity. If he saved Orochimaru, he could naturally join the hidden sound village. If Orochimaru refused to carry out the leaf collapse plan, he could provide a little assistance. He just needed to perfect the details to avoid arousing suspicion. "Sir from Konoha." Li Shang raised his hand and said, "Over at the Mizukage's building, there is a masked ninja wearing the same clothes as him fighting our Kirigakure's Mizukage. Can you help?" Before he could finish his words, Uchiha Itachi had already disappeared. Compared to Orochimaru, there was no doubt that Obito had a greater attraction to him. But before he left, he also left a big gift for Orochimaru. Burning flames. Without any surprises, Orochimaru would soon be burned to death. Li Shang quickly formed hand seals. Waves of water surged onto Orochimaru's body, extinguishing the flames. "Let's go. Head north." Orochimaru only managed to say this sentence before he passed out. He had suffered torment in the illusion and his body was once again roasted by fire. It was difficult for his will to hold on. Li Shang carried him and ran. He was also worried that Uchiha Itachi would come back. At the seaside, he felt a tremendous and earth-shattering surge of chakra. When he turned around, it turned out to be Susanoo. "Oh, poor Obito, may God bless you." After Li Shang finished speaking, he immediately jumped back. The sound of breaking wind rang out. 3 snowflake-shaped crystal shurikens fell where he had just stood. Orochimaru-sama is injured. Li Shang had already guessed who launched the attack. Red Lotus, possessing crystal style, injured? A female ninja wearing a green coat immediately appeared and, upon noticing Orochimaru, quickly asked, "What happened?" "Now is not the time to talk, let's hurry and leave. Haven't you seen that thing behind us?" Li Shang carried Orochimaru onto the boat. Red Lotus glanced at Susanoo, shivered, picked up an oar, and paddled desperately. "Do you know medical ninjutsu?" She saw the green light in Li Zhang's hand and couldn't help but ask. "Don't disturb." Li Shang concentrated intently and didn't have time to pay attention to her. Orochimaru's injuries were too severe. Although he was a genius, it was impossible for him to reach Tsunade's level at the age of 7. The green light in his right hand gradually condensed. The healing resuscitation technique. It was supposed to be performed by several ninjas working together. But now, there was only him. He was running out of chakra. For the first time, Li Shang experienced the feeling of being completely drained. He had no strength left in his body. His face was as pale as a corpse that had been dead for months. "Are you okay?" Red Lotus was startled when she saw that Li Shang hadn't moved for a long time and quickly asked. She pushed him, but there was no response. "What should I do?" Red Lotus had a good personality. Li Shang had saved Orochimaru, so she considered him one of her own. But now both of them were unconscious, and she didn't know medical ninjutsu. For a moment, she was at a loss. Fortunately, she quickly regained her composure and steered the boat towards the land of hot springs, then turned back to the hidden sound village in the land of rice fields. Pain. It hurts so much. Orochimaru woke up while holding his head. His body instinctively tensed, but when he saw Red Lotus, he relaxed. "Sir, you're finally awake?" Red Lotus had a tough time these past few days. She was worried that Orochimaru and Li Shang would meet their demise, and she was also worried that the powerful enemy who had injured Orochimaru would catch up to them. Now that Orochimaru had woken up, she had someone to rely on. "My injuries?" Orochimaru realized. He could feel the cells in his body growing frantically to fill the wound. "He used medical ninjutsu to save you," Red Lotus quickly said, "but he passed out afterwards. Can you see what's wrong?" Orochimaru reached out and placed his hand on Li Zhang's forehead. After a moment, he said, "He's fine. He just needs a few days of rest. He exhausted his chakra." A pensive look appeared in his eyes. As a scientist, he knew how severe his injuries were from Uchiha Itachi. The fact that Li Shang was able to save most of him was simply a genius among geniuses. There was no doubt that it gave him a great surprise. This child, perhaps, could be. Orochimaru licked his lips. Using Li Shang for experiments or as a vessel would be too wasteful. He had plenty of geniuses under his command, such as Kimimaro in the Sound Four, but none of them knew medical ninjutsu. Li Shang could easily become his assistant. Most of Orochimaru's experiments involved the human body, and having an excellent medical ninja would undoubtedly save a lot of time. Of course, the prerequisite was that Li Shang had to be loyal enough. In this regard, Orochimaru was confident. Everyone in the hidden sound village was wholeheartedly following him. During Li Zhang's coma, Uchiha Itachi and Terumi Mei were extremely anxious. Uchiha Itachi arrived at the Mizukage's office before Obito left. Without any hesitation, he activated Susanoo to clear the area. Terumi Mei and the others watched in shock as he brutally beat the mysterious masked man. The terrifying scene was so intense that even the fully transformed Three Tails dared not approach. Fortunately, Uchiha Itachi had a clear target and did not attack them. Nevertheless, Terumi Mei and the others felt uneasy seeing such a powerful Konoha shinobi. Even if the Mizukage returned to normal, how many years would it take for Kirigakure to catch up to Konoha? In the midst of her wavering thoughts, Terumi Mei planned to implement an open policy to reconnect with the outside world. However, the specific impression formed within the bloody mist would take a considerable amount of time to reverse. Obito eventually escaped using Izanagi. Uchiha Itachi was caught off guard by this forbidden technique because he had no prior knowledge of it. But with his intelligence, he managed to capture some clues. Even among the Uchiha clan, those who knew and could use Izanagi were few and far between. It was only after taking control of the Anbu's access to the power center that Uchiha Itachi learned about the tragic past. The Uchiha clan had faced a crisis due to the immense power of Izanagi, which led to it being classified as a forbidden technique. The mysterious man must have been a high-ranking member of the Uchiha clan, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to use Izanagi. Uchiha Itachi planned to investigate the ancestors of the Uchiha clan to see if he could find any clues. Obito was just an unexpected surprise. His goal was to find Uchiha Nami. Uchiha Itachi questioned Terumi Mei and the others one by one, but none of them had seen her. Afterwards, he specifically met with Bawako Juzo. After hearing the detailed account, he narrowed down his search to Higurashi Hiyuki. Uchiha Itachi recalled the conversation he had with Orochimaru during their battle, and found it too coincidental. He also noticed Orochimaru's disappearance, but when he went to find Higurashi Hiyuki, he discovered that she had gone missing. Terumi Mei was already digging deep in Kirigakure. Her current mood was like finally accumulating a collection of figurines, only to have them destroyed by a mischievous child. Uchiha Itachi became more convinced that Higurashi Hiyuki was Uchiha Nami in disguise. However, there was something he didn't understand. From the time of Higurashi Hiyuki's birth until now, 7 years had passed, and there were countless people in Kirigakure who could testify that she was a born and raised ninja. And 1 year ago, Uchiha Nami was still in Konoha. After much thought, Uchiha Itachi believed that there was only one truth. After Uchiha Nami left Konoha, She used her Sharingan to control Higurashi Hyuki in Kirigakure, and planned to overthrow Obito's plan, while also having Bawako Juzo infiltrate the high ranks. It was a series of interconnected events, just like her style. But if that was the case, Uchiha Itachi had lost his target. Because Higurashi Hyuki had been captured by Orochimaru, Uchiha Nami must have given up control. In this helpless situation, he began aimlessly searching in Kirigakure. Hidden Sound Village. Li Shang was awakened. Screams and cries mixed together, preventing him from sleeping peacefully. It was like a group of bratty kids crying. Li Shang opened his eyes. An unfamiliar ceiling. Not white, but muddy. The room was dim, without sunlight. Li Shang speculated that he might be underground. Considering that he had saved Orochimaru before he fell into a coma, the location seemed obvious. Li Shang remembered that this snake liked environments that drove people with claustrophobia crazy. He got up from the bed, pushed open the door, and there were 2 long corridors on either side. The walls on both sides were lit with torches. The sound he had heard earlier came from the left. There's not a single person here. Li Shang thought for a moment and followed the corridor to a hall. It was not quite appropriate to call it a hall, it was more like an arena. There were many people wailing inside. Li Shang raised an eyebrow. A completely different energy from chakra was swirling in the air. Natural energy. It was Orochimaru's live broadcast of the scene where he placed a curse seal. But Li Shang vaguely felt a sense of familiarity with natural energy. It seemed like he had seen it somewhere before. A flash of insight came to him, it was the magic of the type moon. Almost identical, but natural energy appeared more dense and solid. And this kind of magic, type moon also described it as true ether, the atmospheric magic of the divine era. Modern magicians, due to the significant decline of divine era magic, had to develop magic circuits and use their own magic. Simply put, true ether is the power used by gods and divine era magicians, and in modern times, except for a few places, it has almost disappeared. Li Shang stroked his chin and fell into deep thought. In a world where humans can survive, the composition of the atmosphere is almost the same. In other words, the ninja world is now in an environment similar to the divine era of type moon. The reason why I say similar is because there are not many places with abundant natural energy. The most famous ones are the 3 major sacred places for summoning beasts. And they are equivalent to the fantasy species in type moon, such as dragons, chimeras, etc. Sage chakra is the result of balancing physical energy, spiritual energy, and natural energy. Using sage chakra can enter sage mode. Li Shang became interested at this time. If sage mode could also be used in type moon, wouldn't he be unstoppable? But the premise is to find a substitute for chakra. Type moon only has magic and true ether. Developing sage mode is not such a simple matter. Do you want the power of the curse seal? Orochimaru appeared in front of him and asked. Li Shang looked up and asked, can I refuse? Not to mention anything else, the curse seal transformation is really ugly. Even Sasuke couldn't bear the cosmetic effect. You don't have the right to refuse. Orochimaru's tone changed and said, but you saved my life, so I'll give you a chance to explain. I can see that this power is very imperfect. Li Shang shook his head and said, I am a person who pursues perfection. If it is incomplete, I would rather not have it. Interesting. Orochimaru suddenly licked his tongue. Just by this short minute, Li Shang could see the problem with his curse seal. He was truly a born scientist. You are smarter than I imagined. Orochimaru pointed to the ninjas wailing in the pit and said, so you are more valuable than them. He almost said, I really like you. To receive praise from Orochimaru-sama, I should say that I am proud. Li Shang smiled and said. Orochimaru looked at him with interest and asked, since you know who I am, why aren't you afraid? I have been interested in medical ninjutsu since I was a child. The human body is truly amazing. It can not only create chakra, but also inherit bloodline limits. Li Shang said with longing, many times, I wonder what their essence is. Why can bloodline limits be passed down to future generations? But why can some people awaken them while others cannot? Can ordinary ninjas have bloodline limits? Orochimaru was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. When it comes to smiles, one cannot help but mention the Uchiha's 3 laughing geniuses. Perhaps it is a confirmation of that saying. Laughter brings strength. Each of them possesses astonishing power. But Orochimaru's smile is nowhere near as bold as Uchiha Madara's, appearing particularly restrained. It's like a hidden knife, devoid of warmth. You never know when it might stab into you. Li Shang can tell that Orochimaru is in a good mood. Because his previous answer wasn't just a random guess. It was a design specifically tailored for Orochimaru, combining his identity as a medical ninja. You really are a rare and special individual. Orochimaru becomes even more certain of his previous decision. It would be a waste not to have him as an assistant. And wasting is shameful. Although I am not a medical ninja, Tsunade used to be my teammate, so I am skilled in medical ninjutsu as well. Orochimaru smiles faintly. He knows very well that relying solely on persuasive words is only temporary if he wants to keep someone's loyalty. Benefits are eternal. He dares to say that the geniuses under his command stay in Otogakure willingly. Because he gives them what they desire. Since Li Shang wants medical ninjutsu and wants to know the secrets of the human body, Orochimaru can naturally fulfill his wishes. Thank you, Lord Orochimaru. Li Shang shows an excited expression at the right moment. Perfectly playing the role of a 7-year-old child receiving a beloved toy. Although these toys are not things like toy cars or marbles, but knowledge, and knowledge is power. Orochimaru is very satisfied with his performance and says, from today onwards, you will stay in Otogakure. Train with Kimimaro and the others in the morning, and accompany me for experiments in the afternoon. Orochimaru is still Orochimaru after all. He doesn't fully trust Li Shang. The initial experiments are just trivial matters. Li Shang, on the other hand, is not in a hurry. There are still 6 years until the Chunin exams. He has time to study. It's just that Kimimaro's personality is too reclusive, making it difficult to strike up a conversation. Although there are many geniuses in Otogakure, Li Shang holds Kimimaro in high regard, and at most, he would add another person like Red Lotus. As for the Sound Four, their strength comes entirely from cursed seals. They themselves cannot be considered top-tier geniuses. But Li Shang quickly gets an opportunity, because of Kimimaro's bloodline disease. Kimimaro, born in the Yoruichi clan, possesses the powerful dead bone pulse, but their clan carries an incurable bloodline disease. Orochimaru guides Li Shang while introducing. There is a tinge of regret in his tone. If it weren't for the bloodline disease, Kimimaro would be the perfect vessel he desires. He tells Li Shang all this to make him responsible for future treatments. Kimimaro often has to lie in bed, but Orochimaru is quite busy. Whether it's the Akatsuki organization or collecting geniuses, he often has to personally handle things. Otogakure was established not long ago. The Sound Four haven't fully matured yet, and only Red Lotus has decent strength. Lord Orochimaru. Kimimaro's face shows an unusual expression of frustration upon hearing his words. This is an emotion he would never display under normal circumstances. In front of others, he always maintains a confident and calm expression. The faint firelight reflects on his face, casting a dark shadow, just like his mood. After setting up the IV drip, Li Shang says, I believe that the bloodline disease is not incurable. Obviously, this is a lie. Even Orochimaru and Yakushi Kabuto couldn't solve it in the original story. His chances are slim. But Li Shang has a secret method. The dead bone pulse clearly originates from Otsutsuki Kaguya's Shikatsumiku. The Yoruichi clan also carries the bloodline of the Otsutsuki clan. But why does the Yoruichi clan have the bloodline disease while the Otsutsuki clan does not? Li Shang believes the key lies in the eyes. Kimimaro still ignored him. Orochimaru pondered and said, perhaps it is possible, provided that Hiyuki can become a medical ninja like Tsunade. He was still confident in himself, but ultimately, he was not a medical ninja. If he had someone like Tsunade, perhaps he could unravel the bloodline disease. Kimimaro's eyes suddenly lit up and he asked, is that true? Orochimaru nodded slightly. He hoped even more than Kimimaro that the bloodline disease could be cured. Li Shang remained silent, not wanting to discourage Orochimaru's confidence at an inappropriate time. Kimimaro's treatment will be entrusted to you. Orochimaru glanced at Li Shang and he had executed all of his operations almost perfectly. Truly a delightful genius. After this, Li Shang felt a change in Kimimaro's attitude. The 4 sound ninjas were always unruly individuals. They were not pleased with Li Zhang's sudden appearance. Because this guy received too much favor from Orochimaru. But after Kimimaro spoke up for him, no one dared to speak ill of him in front of his face. Li Shang unexpectedly became the leader of this group of geniuses. Although it didn't mean much, time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. Li Shang turned 10 years old. His strength had skyrocketed in these 3 years. He could be considered the chief medical ninja of the hidden sound village. He had a high reputation. It must be said that medical ninjas were respected. Like Tsunade. Although she drank, fought, and gambled, in the hearts of many people, she would always be the holy and radiant good mother. Aside from medical ninjutsu, Li Shang would spar with Kimimaro and the others in taijutsu and ninjutsu, and his skills in those areas also greatly improved. Most importantly, he had gained Orochimaru's trust. He had been exposed to some secret experiments, such as cell cloning and transplantation, curse seal techniques, and improvements to the impure world reincarnation. Hiyuki, a red-haired little girl, Tayuya, pushed open the door without any courtesy and said, Orochimaru-sama's mission. Where are we going again? Li Shang sighed. A perfectly fine medical ninja had become a grave robber. It was really absurd. Because of his involvement in improving the impure world reincarnation, he would occasionally go out with Kimimaro and the others to plunder tombs. Kusagakure. Kusagakure? Li Shang raised an eyebrow. When it came to Kusagakure, he naturally thought of Karen. At this time, she had not yet joined Orochimaru, so she was still living a miserable life. There was a battle at the Bridge of Heaven and Earth in Kusagakure, and many ninjas from Iwagakure and Konoha village died there. Tayuya explained. Orochimaru-sama hopes that you can find a corpse of the Uchiha clan for him. Since Orochimaru was defeated by Uchiha Itachi, his obsession with the Sharingan has not diminished in the slightest. But until the improvement of the impure world reincarnation is complete, he dares not go to Konoha. The Mangekyo Sharingan left a huge psychological shadow on him. Since he couldn't go to Konoha, Orochimaru could only try his luck on the former battlefield. Surprisingly, it worked. He really found 2 pairs of Sharingan in Kirigakure. Let's go. Li Shang led the 4 sound ninjas to the Bridge of Heaven and Earth. There is a saying. There is no other reason, only familiarity with one's own hands. They had now become professional grave robbers. Li Shang had Doyo and the others carry the coffin, while he entered Kusagakure under the pretext of buying medicine. The feeling of grass-hidden village is extremely terrible. It is dilapidated and chaotic. Li Shang had only been here for a few minutes and already witnessed 2 or 3 fights. There is no one managing it. Compared to grass-hidden village, Konoha and Kirigakure can already be considered paradise. This is the limitation of a small ninja village, ignorant, brutal, lacking foresight. The mother and daughter, Kazura and Rin, are rare members of the Uzumaki clan. Whether as a sealing ninja or a medical ninja, or even for trading with the 5 great villages, they can bring great value to grass-hidden village. But in the end, they are treated as mere bloodbags, drained of their resources. This led to Kazura's mother being drained of her fresh blood and dying. If it weren't for some luck in joining Orochimaru, Kazura's fate would likely have been the same. Li Shang easily found out Kazura's location. What's outrageous is that the ninja who provided the information also mentioned a price, saying that her blood has the effect comparable to a holy medicine. Li Shang had a subtle feeling. It's like meeting a real estate agent who exaggerates and ultimately wants you to pay more. Why don't I just go directly to Kazura? There's no middleman to make a profit. Ah, I've been led astray. He came to take Kazura away. Li Shang grew tired of listening and gave the ninja a punch the size of a sandbag. Such a scum, it's a waste to kill him. He plans to come to Grass-Hidden Village more often in the future and make them into sacrifices for the impure world reincarnation. Also, to experience the pain of having one's life force drained by others. Kazura can execute it, consider it revenge for her mother. Although Li Shang is not a saint, he still has his limits. He knows what should be done and what shouldn't be done. A few minutes later, Li Shang stopped in his tracks. In front of an ordinary cottage. Ah! A painful and numb cry. And there were 3 people waiting in line outside the door. Li Shang felt inexplicably annoyed. Scum, pervert. He didn't hesitate to take action. Bang, bang, bang. The 3 ninjas all fell to the ground. Li Zhang's overall strength is now enough to be considered a jonin in Konoha village. It is well known that jonin in small ninja villages usually have a lot of water. Not to mention genin and chunin. Li Shang opened the door. He saw a middle-aged man biting the arm of an 8-year-old girl with all his might. Even if blood was flowing, he didn't care. When he saw Li Shang, he couldn't help but be stunned. But before he could speak, all he saw was a fist in his line of sight. Kazura widened her eyes, instinctively retreated, and her body trembled. Li Shang sighed. She was wearing an extremely thin outer garment, and her exposed arms were covered in dense bite marks. The Uzumaki clan's physique is originally strong, so these bite marks shouldn't last long. The current situation indicates that she has been bitten too many times, far exceeding her recovery ability. At the same time, it has also depleted a lot of her life force. Sir. Please don't kill me. You. Kazura's speech was intermittent due to fear. But her actions were clear. She had already extended her arm. Having lacked education since childhood, she only knew that her blood was valuable, and at this moment, she wanted to beg for mercy in exchange for her life. Li Shang squatted down and grabbed her wrist. Kazura instinctively closed her eyes, but instead of feeling pain, she felt warmth. She saw a green light emitting from Li Zhang's hands, and wherever it passed, the bite marks disappeared one by one. This is medical ninjutsu. Li Shang introduced, using chakra to stimulate cells to achieve the purpose of healing wounds. It can also be used for detoxification and attack. Kazura remained silent, dumbfounded. She thought that her blood should have the same effect. It turns out to be so warm. If you want to learn, I can teach you. Li Shang smiled, withdrew his hand, and said, "All right, let's go." He went to the door and saw that Shang Lin was still in a daze, so he asked, "What? Do you want to stay here?" Shang Lin suddenly woke up and finally realized what had happened. She quickly ran up to Li Shang. The consequences of staying here had been told to her by her mother long ago. Li Shang thought for a moment and directly used ninjutsu to take her away. Although Konoha was not great, it had a large number of people. It was difficult to escape once discovered. Li Shang and Shang Lin arrived at the Shinobi Bridge and happened to see Doyo, Kitamaru, Sakan and Yukon, and Jirobo carrying 2 coffins. They gained quite a lot, but tomb raiding was ultimately illegal. Li Shang usually wrote down their names and the locations of the tombs in his notebook. After Orochimaru fell into the trap in Konoha, he would have the Hokage Anbu return them. Impure world reincarnation only required a small amount of their physical bodies. This notebook was called the Tomb Raiding Notebook. Ahem. Li Shang explained Shang Lin's situation to them. He said that he had found a genius and wanted to hand her over to Orochimaru. The others had no objections, except for Doyo, who made a sarcastic remark. "HMPH, you're quite carefree, still having time to play the hero." Li Shang was used to her sarcasm. He didn't say much. Otherwise, they would definitely argue for a long time. Doyo had a competitive personality and would not give up until he won, even in an argument. Although she was no match for Li Shang when she was serious. After all, Li Shang was a keyboard warrior. "Orochimaru-sama, this is Shang Lin, she is a member of the Uzumaki clan." Li Shang smiled and said, "She is very helpful to our plan and can be taught sealing jutsu to deal with the 9 tails." In the original work, Orochimaru treated Shang Lin quite casually. He only valued her perception ability. He had never taught her medical ninjutsu or sealing ninjutsu. Orochimaru licked his lips when he heard this. He had never thought about it from this angle before. But it made sense. He was well aware that the Jinchuriki of Konoha was a member of the Uzumaki clan. And sealing jutsu did indeed restrain tailed beasts. If he wanted to launch the plan to destroy Konoha, using Shang Lin as a backup would have no loss, and it might actually work. Li Shang had long known Orochimaru's thoughts because of his involvement in improving the impure world reincarnation, so he made this suggestion. It was indeed a waste for Shang Lin to be treated as a vase, just like in the original work. Moreover, learning sealing jutsu would also allow her to protect herself. If she was lucky, becoming a powerful ninja would not be a problem. Orochimaru quickly agreed. For him, it was just a matter of convenience. As an all-around ninja, he naturally knew sealing jutsu. And it was the most authentic Uzumaki sealing jutsu. "After you settle Shang Lin, come find me. I'll take you to a place." Orochimaru waved his hand and said. Although Li Shang was puzzled, he didn't ask. He took Shang Lin downstairs, had someone change her clothes, and arranged a place for her to stay. Half an hour later, Li Shang returned to Orochimaru's room. No need to resist. Orochimaru reached out and grabbed Li Zhang's shoulder. In the next moment, a burst of smoke flashed by. Li Shang felt his vision blur. When he opened his eyes again, he was already in a dim place. Ryuchi Cave? He remembered the ninjutsu Orochimaru had used earlier. It was the reverse summoning technique. And the giant snake in front of them also proved this. Li Shang couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. It seemed that he had completely gained Orochimaru's trust. Of course, it was also possible that Orochimaru thought that even if he learned the summoning technique, he wouldn't be able to turn over his palm, just like Sasuke in the original work. "Bosses, it's a new week, please give me your recommendations, I beg you." Ryuchi Cave is said to be a cave, but it is actually quite large. After all, it is as famous as Mount Myoboku and Shikatsumyaku Forest, so it wouldn't make sense for it to be just a cave. Li Shang followed Orochimaru and eventually arrived at a temple deep inside. The white snake sage resides inside. She has been alive for thousands of years. Orochimaru stared at the plaque of the temple, his tone showing some fluctuations. There is no doubt that he was greatly influenced by the White Snake Sage. After deeply understanding the limits of humans, he transformed himself into the White Snake Sage and completely stopped being human. Originally, in order to meet her, you would have to pass 3 tests. Orochimaru was referring to the high level of Ryuchi Cave, the 3 Snake Princesses levels. It is rumored that if you fail to pass, you will be devoured. But why didn't we have to? Li Shang asked. Whether or not you have to is up to the White Snake Sage to decide. Orochimaru reached out and knocked on the door. Li Shang instinctively looked up. After the door opened, there was a stone seat in the center of the high place. At this moment, an old lady in white clothes was meditating with her eyes closed. However, the pipe she held in her mouth ruined the atmosphere. White Snake Sage. Orochimaru bowed and called out. Orochimaru, long time no see. The White Snake Sage spoke slowly, but very clearly, completely different from her appearance that showed her age. In fact, she could completely transform into an 18-year-old beauty. It's just that she doesn't have that kind of interest. You brought him to see me because you want me to teach him senjutsu? The White Snake Sage glanced at Li Shang and asked. She is only responsible for teaching senjutsu in Ryuchi Cave. If it's just about adding a contractee, there is no need to see her at all. Just like Mount Myoboku, when Jiraiya made Uzumaki Naruto sign a contract, it was a fairly simple matter. Yes. Orochimaru answered, I think he has the talent to learn senjutsu. I know you have a good eye for people, but can he pass the tests of Ryuchi Cave first? The White Snake Sage knocked on her pipe. A woman with blue hair appeared in the air. A white ribbon passed through her arm and floated above her head. She looked quite ethereal. Orochimaru fell silent for a moment and said, Feiui, you accompany him. Li Shang nodded. I am Tien Zinshenji, in charge of the first test. Tien Zinshenji looked at the calm Li Shang and said, people who come here usually are crazy about pursuing power, but you are completely different. In the next moment, she revealed black eyeshadow that extended to her nostrils and a long blue tongue. She completely changed from her previous gentleness and became ferocious. I really want to know how you taste. Don't disappoint me. Li Shang was startled. It's not that his mental resilience is weak, but this snake princess was too sudden. It's like a certain anime he has seen before, a peaceful slice of life anime, but suddenly the girl's head rolls to the ground. This kind of tongue is quite in line with the preferences of certain people. But Li Shang is not Shu Xian. Snakes are one of the things he hates the most. Please have a seat. Tien Zinshenji led him to a long dining table. After speaking, she disappeared, but after a moment, she continuously brought delicious dishes. The aroma filled the air. Please eat. Tien Zinshenji smiled and urged. Li Shang mentally complained, do you think I haven't watched Water Margin? Your words are like, Da Lang, get up and drink the medicine, can I eat? I'm not hungry. Li Shang shook his head and said. Tien Zinshenji tried to persuade him a few more times. But it was still useless. In the end, she clapped her hands and said, consider the first test passed. All the food and herself disappeared. Soon, another girl appeared. To appear younger than her, looking like a primary school student. Dressed very similarly, both floating with ribbons. I am Ichijima Haim. Ichijima Haim smiled, her pink tongue licked the corner of her mouth, and she said, I can't wait to eat you. This time, Li Shang was mentally prepared. Looking at her suddenly thickened makeup, he asked, what is the test? Ichijima Haim was slightly startled and said, follow me. Under her guidance, Li Shang entered a cave. Immediately, the entrance of the cave was blocked. You have to fill all the holes before you can leave. Ichijima Haim's voice came from outside the cave. Li Shang surveyed the surroundings and raised an eyebrow involuntarily. It was full of small holes, but there were no items on the ground to fill them. So, this level of the test was about chakra control and patience. Obviously, this didn't pose a challenge for Li Shang. After spending 3 days and 3 nights, he controlled his chakra to fill all the small holes. Ichijima Haim did not appear again. This time, it was a red-haired mature woman. Tanzenheim. As soon as she saw Li Shang, she became very enthusiastic. Her neck became very long, then wrapped around his body, and she bit his neck. Li Shang immediately felt his body heat up and his vision blurred. It was a genjutsu. As a former Uchiha, he was very clear about what he was experiencing. At this moment, Li Shang suddenly understood why Orochimaru didn't learn Sage Mode. It's possible that he didn't pass this third test. Otherwise, there would be no reason for Orochimaru not to learn it. After all, his ideal was to learn all ninjutsu. In addition, he specifically studied the curse seal, this pseudo-sage mode. Li Shang regained his senses to deal with the genjutsu in front of him. There was no battle as he had imagined, it was a questioning. People he knew appeared one by one and questioned him. For example, Shisui, Itachi, Sasuke, Terumi Mei, and others. It was child's play. Li Shang turned the tables and left them speechless. I can deceive them in person, so why would I be afraid of your little genjutsu? When he opened his eyes again, he saw the white snake sage in front of him. Li Shang returned to the temple. Take off your clothes. The white snake sage spoke. Li Shang was stunned, understanding that the training had officially begun. So he readily took off his shirt. Take off your pants too. The white snake sage said again. Li Shang froze in place. Was his first time going to be seen by a 1,000-year-old white snake? What are you afraid of? I am a snake, you are a human, we are not the same kind. The white snake sage took a puff of her pipe and said with a smile. But you seem quite happy. Why don't you transform into a beautiful girl? Like Kana, Ilya, or Izumi Sasaki. I have no psychological pressure. Li Shang was speechless, but he didn't take off everything, leaving only his underwear. The white snake sage didn't say anything more. She waved her hand, and a bucket appeared on the ground. It was filled with sparkling liquid. It looked like water, but the texture was completely different. Li Shang felt it was similar to aloe vera gel or something. Cover your whole body with it, the white snake sage reminded. Li Shang seemed hesitant, but he remembered that when Naruto trained in sage mode at Mount Myoboku, he also applied oil on his body. Don't worry. The white snake sage smiled and said, it's clean and hygienic. After Li Shang was covered in an unknown liquid, he felt a cool sensation all over his body. Everything else was normal. Close your eyes and feel it with your heart. The white snake sage tapped his pipe and said, if you can't perceive and absorb natural energy, it means you are not compatible with sage mode. Li Shang sat down on the ground. He had long noticed the dense magic power in Ryuchi Cave. It felt like being immersed in sticky grease. He felt a bit regretful. During Fate, Stay Night, he should have asked his senior sister Astati if there were any divine magic of the gods he could learn. Li Shang followed the white snake sage's guidance to absorb natural energy. It seems Orochimaru was right. The white snake sage showed a hint of surprise on his face. In less than a minute, Li Shang had already completed the first step successfully. In her 1,000 years of experience, this undoubtedly ranked in the top 3. Now comes the most difficult part, maintaining the balance between chakra and natural energy. The white snake sage's mood was unusually good, seeing Li Zhang's talent. As a descendant of Ryuchi Cave, not being able to use sage mode was quite embarrassing. Fortunately, Orochimaru's abilities were indeed impressive. If it were someone else, they would definitely not be well received. The most important thing is that there will always be someone better, just like how animals compare to each other. Snakes and toads have never gotten along. The white snake sage knew that Mount Myoboku had recently accepted a new disciple, who was said to be the child of prophecy. The great toad sage did something similar last time, and it seemed to be the sage of 6 paths. It would be quite uncomfortable if another one appeared. The white snake sage raised his hand and flicked his middle finger, immediately waking up Li Shang. Start over, stay focused. Thank you, sage. Li Shang lowered his head and saw white scales appearing on the back of his hand. Will Mount Myoboku turn into frogs and Ryuchi Cave turn into snakes? Is the end result petrification? Li Shang just thought about it. He didn't want to test it on himself. He remembered that Naruto was awakened by a black stick during his training. This white snake sage felt quite good, but what Li Shang didn't know was that he was being treated favorably because of his talent. If it were someone else, they might end up being eaten by the 3 snake sisters. Half a month later, Li Shang learned sage mode. He was a bit surprised at how fast he learned. But he still didn't leave Ryuchi Cave or tell the white snake sage. Because he wanted to experiment with more ratios. The ninja world didn't have magic power, but it had natural energy of true ether. So Li Shang wanted a way to dilute true ether to the level of modern magic power and combine it with natural energy to see if he could create a magician version of sage mode. In Li Zhang's thoughts, Ryuchi Cave experienced its most painful ordeal in 1,000 years. Small explosions every 3 days, big explosions every 7 days. It sounded like firecrackers during the new year. When the white snake sage learned that the liquid stored in Ryuchi Cave was about to run out, her heart almost stopped. She almost couldn't recover. White snake sage, just eat him, I can't stand it anymore. Turbid Current Princess scratched her red hair, her face full of killing intent. He wasted such a precious thing as dragon saliva, eating him would be too merciful. Mitsuki Island Princess clenched her small fist and said, at least torture him for a few decades. That shouldn't be the case. The White Snake Sage looked puzzled, her right hand still soothing her heart. According to Li Zhang's talent, why couldn't he find a balance? Eating him or torturing him won't make any sense, and dragon saliva won't come back. The White Snake Sage sighed, the best solution now is to let him learn Sage Mode and serve Ryuchi Cave. This is a sunk cost. Of course, Li Shang didn't know the content of their conversation, nor did he dare to say anything about sunk costs in front of them. His magician version of Sage Mode was already approaching perfection. Just waiting for the return of the full moon to conduct the experiment. After all, the two worlds are ultimately different, and the diluted magic may not necessarily meet the conditions completely. But the method and experience have already been obtained, and the only thing left is a matter of time. The 3-year period has come to an end, welcoming the return of the Dragon King. Li Shang tried to twist his mouth and found it really difficult to twist it so high. It's not entirely wrong to call him the Dragon King. After all, this is Ryuchi Cave, but he himself didn't expect it to take 3 years. And he also sought guidance from Orochimaru. In addition to practicing Sage Mode, Li Shang often returns to the Hidden Sound Village. Anyway, with the reverse summoning technique, it's very convenient to come and go. He also summoned a snake as a summoning beast. A green snake. I don't know if it's the same one as Sasuke's. But its strength is decent, named Zhao King. Li Shang arrived at the White Snake Sage's temple and found that the 3 snake sisters were also there. This is rare. But he didn't ask why. White Snake Sage, I have already learned Sage Mode and have come to bid you farewell. Li Shang bowed and said, you've learned it? The White Snake Sage was stunned for a moment, then took a deep breath and said, you've finally learned it. There was a sense of relief in her words. There's no way she was responsible for teaching him the secret arts. If there were any problems, she would have to deal with them. Li Shang smiled apologetically and said, thanks to your care over the past 3 years, I have achieved such success. He said it sincerely. Ryuchi Cave has indeed treated him well. It's okay, just don't embarrass us in the future. The White Snake Sage waved her hand and said, go quickly. There was a hint of urgency in her calm tone. Li Shang returned to the Hidden Sound Village. Another failure. As soon as he entered the laboratory, he heard Orochimaru speaking. How can we enhance the controllability of the impure world reincarnation? Orochimaru looked pensive. Li Shang knew what he was troubled by. In the past 3 years, the improved version of the impure world reincarnation was almost perfect. Even if the summoned powerhouses couldn't reach their peak, they still had about 90% of their strength. But the problem was Senju Hashirama and Senju Tobirama. They understood the impure world reincarnation and knew how to undo it. If they were summoned at their peak, wouldn't it be inviting trouble? But if they weren't summoned, Orochimaru didn't have the confidence to carry out the Leaf Village collapse plan. Unless he brought the Akatsuki with him, Orochimaru didn't want to. His idea was actually quite simple. By attacking the Leaf Village and obtaining the Mangekyo Sharingan, his strength would greatly increase, and then he could eliminate the Akatsuki and obtain the Rinnegan. Orochimaru didn't know that the Rinnegan was evolved from the Mangekyo Sharingan. He thought that having the Mangekyo Sharingan might give him a chance to obtain the Rinnegan. Because he was really envious. The Rinnegan was the eye of the Sage of 6 Paths, and if he could obtain it, perhaps he could glimpse a higher level of existence. In a sense, the experiments Orochimaru conducted with Hashirama's cells and the Sharingan were actually a path to the Sage of 6 Paths. And it was the correct path. Lord Orochimaru. Li Shang suggested, perhaps we can try to focus on the sacrifices and find some unique beings that are close to humans. Orochimaru was slightly taken aback by the suggestion. He immediately thought of White Zetsu and couldn't help but shift his gaze. In the morning, Li Shang hinted to Orochimaru about White Zetsu, and in the afternoon, he saw White Zetsu. The efficiency was astonishing. Amidst a series of screams, White Zetsu gradually transformed into the appearance of Senju Hashirama. Orochimaru's face lit up with excitement as he licked his lips. Indeed, White Zetsu was an extremely special resource. He could sense the firm control deep within. Senju Hashirama had arrived in the ninja world he had once been loyal to. Unfortunately, it was an unnatural return. Senju Hashirama opened his eyes and surveyed his surroundings. After a moment, he complained, Tobirama, I told you not to develop the forbidden technique recklessly, but you didn't listen. Now you can't even rest in peace. There was no doubt that he realized his own state. Orochimaru had no intention of chatting with him, so he temporarily turned him into a speechless vegetable. White Zetsu was quite rare. He didn't plan on summoning him to Konoha again. So Senju Hashirama lay in a coffin, carried away by 4 shinobi. I have obtained 3 special sacrifices this time. In addition to Senju Hashirama, I plan to summon Senju Tobirama and the 3rd Kazekage, Orochimaru introduced. Our plan will start from Sanagakure. The soul of the 4th Hokage Namikaze Minato was taken by the Shinigami and couldn't be used for impure world reincarnation. And the 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, after all, was his teacher. In the past, many people analyzed that one of Orochimaru's goals in his plan to destroy Konoha was to give Sarutobi Hiruzen a dignified exit. Now, because of Li Shang, the 3rd generation died prematurely, so Orochimaru naturally didn't have that intention. He only wanted to obtain the Mangekyo Sharingan now. I will disguise myself as the 4th Kazekage, Rosha, and hold a joint Chunin exam with Konoha. That way, we can smoothly enter Konoha, Orochimaru casually said. Li Shang had known about this plan for a long time, and in a sense, he had induced Orochimaru to come up with it. Including the impure world reincarnation. There was no other choice. If they didn't do this, Orochimaru wouldn't dare to go to Konoha. But why did he bring it up now? In the 6 years you've been away, your strength has skyrocketed, but without a specific reference. I'm leaving Rosha to you. Orochimaru looked at Li Shang, a faint curve appearing at the corner of his mouth. Especially after learning Sage Mode, he was even more curious about Li Zhang's true abilities. Li Shang could hear the hidden meaning in his words. There was no doubt it was a test, but since they had arrived in Konoha, he had no choice. Orochimaru, your Death Star is shining in the sky. The only value you have is to complete your remaining life according to the script. Li Shang nodded and said, I will do my best. Rosha, the 4th Kazekage, but from his life, he was extremely unqualified. Aside from the fact that he wanted to unite with Orochimaru to attack Konoha because of Konoha's strength, his mindless decision-making led to his own demise. The handling of the Jinchuriki alone was quite absurd. Rosha sealed the one tail inside his newborn son, Gaara. But because of Gaara's rampage, he considered him a failure and repeatedly ordered his nephew, Yashimaru, to assassinate him. In the end, it resulted in Gaara's terrible personality. In comparison, Uzumaki Naruto didn't seem as pitiful. 2 days later, Orochimaru received a reply from Rosha, asking him to come to Sanagakure to discuss important matters. An endless desert. The distant scenery was distorted by the heat waves. Li Shang surveyed the ruins around him. This place used to be a village. But it was destroyed because the oasis disappeared. After a moment, Li Shang heard footsteps. Rosha and 9 Sand Shinobi appeared before them. Orochimaru, Rosha, wearing the Kazecage's robe, said, I hope our cooperation today can be successful. It will be. Orochimaru revealed a sinister smile. Rosha furrowed his brows slightly. If it weren't for Konoha being too troublesome, he wouldn't want to cooperate with Orochimaru. After all, Orochimaru had a terrible reputation. Who knows if he would betray them, but he had no choice. Sanagakure was too poor, so poor that they had to look to their wealthy neighbor. Especially in recent years, Konoha's development had left him dumbfounded. The idol industry is sweeping through the ninja world, earning pots and bowls full of money. In addition, various novel gadgets also make him envious. Orochimaru glanced at Li Shang. Immediately, he formed hand seals, and countless lion majesties rushed towards the 9 ninjas behind Gaara. Orochimaru, what are you doing? The sudden change caught Gaara off guard. But Li Shang didn't wait. He raised his hands and shot out highly compressed water bullets with his index fingers. In an instant, they pierced through Gaara's heart. But instead of blood, sand flowed out. The ground trembled the next moment, shaking continuously as if some monster was about to emerge. Li Shang instinctively jumped. In the moment his feet left the ground, countless golden sands surged like waves, rising to a height of 3 meters. Shadow descended. Li Shang opened his mouth and a stream of water flowed out, instantly transforming into a water dragon. Gaara snorted. He felt underestimated. Orochimaru had a water-style 12 or 13-year-old kid deal with him. It was simply absurd. Because the desert environment would greatly reduce the effectiveness of water style. The water dragon collided with the golden sand. But it only slowed down its speed slightly. Li Shang wasn't surprised by this. He just needed to buy a few seconds. Red eyeshadow appeared on Li Zhang's face. He took a deep breath. A bloody light flickered around him. Vaguely, a dragon coiled. Then it exploded. The air vibrated continuously. A strange and invisible attack spread out. The golden sand immediately lost control and fell one after another. And Gaara felt a numbness in his body, as if someone was rubbing his bones. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. In just a few seconds, Li Shang transformed from a lamb into a fierce tiger. Damn it! Move! Move quickly! Gaara silently shouted in his heart. Li Shang raised his hand. Suddenly, the yellow sand around Gaara was pulled and instantly transformed into 7 white snakes. What the hell? Gaara widened his eyes. As the cage, his best skills were magnet style and sand control secret technique. But when did he learn to turn sand into snakes? This was neither scientific nor in line with the principles of ninjutsu. Ah! Gaara roared in anger. He broke free from the previous numbness and clasped his hands together. A mass of golden sand condensed into a drill in front of him, madly thrusting forward. But it was still too late. One of the snakes that slipped through the net bit his right calf. Meanwhile, Orochimaru had already dealt with the 9 sand shinobi and eagerly observed Li Shang. Especially the recent use of the impure world reincarnation, which amazed him. Inanimate objects could actually be given life. Truly worthy of being a forbidden jutsu, it completely exceeded his imagination. Orochimaru once again felt regret. He couldn't learn Sage Mode. With his right leg injured, Gaara flew into the air in a timely manner. Li Shang frowned slightly. There weren't many ninjas who could fly, but they were all troublesome. Gaara formed hand seals frantically. A massive amount of chakra drew out countless golden sands, forming a sea of gold in the air. Truly a golden miner. In his previous life, Li Shang quite liked the magnet style, not because of the gold, but because he thought it was cool to be able to control something at will. Just like a showman, like Magneto, he glanced at the pile of gold sand beneath Gaara's feet. Once again, he used water style, but it was completely different from before. Sage Art Water Style Great Waterfall Technique. At least 3 times the power. A large amount of water appeared around him, rapidly spinning under the guidance of his chakra. The sea of gold descended from the sky, while this flow of water rose from the ground, like a slanted tower piercing the clouds. A shower of gold, or rather a fountain, under the force of rotation, spread across the desert like a sprinkler. Gaara's line of sight was blocked by his own sea of gold. But he had experienced countless battles, so even if he couldn't see Li Shang, he wouldn't relax his vigilance and think he had killed his opponent. A few seconds later, he suddenly froze. Apart from the gold sand covering the ground, there was nothing else in the desert. Li Shang had disappeared without him knowing when. Gaara's heart tightened. He completely failed to detect Li Zhang's trace. Thinking of this, he covered his right eye. A pile of gold sand rose from the ground and quickly transformed into an eye, high up in the air, observing the situation on the ground. His third eye, but it was still useless. In the moment of his doubtful thoughts, the gold sand beneath his feet turned into white snakes, surging and engulfing him. They had been hiding in his blind spot, but when did they get under the sand he controlled? Li Shang calmly watched him. The reason Gaara failed was because he didn't understand Sage Mode. The amplification of Sage Mode was comprehensive. Not only ninjutsu, but his speed also greatly increased. In this situation, using the body flicker technique, he could already keep up with Shisui. The few seconds Gaara lost sight of him were more than enough for Li Shang to run to his feet and prepare Sage Art Reanimation. Not bad, Orochimaru casually remarked. He glanced at Gaara and put on the prepared ceremonial robe. Suddenly, memories of his past struggle with Minato for the position of Hokage came to his mind. He never expected to return to Konoha as the Hokage. Deal with him. Orochimaru's emotional fluctuation was just a momentary thing. As a person like him, he had long abandoned unnecessary things. Li Shang nodded. Orochimaru was so confident because he could tell that Gaara was already dead. But he forgot that Li Shang was a medical ninja. He had many ways to make someone appear dead. Li Shang didn't kill Gaara. After all, he was a cage. Leaving him as a puppet would obviously be more beneficial to Tendo. Li Shang casually made a grave for him and then followed Orochimaru to Sanagakure. Orochimaru's disguise naturally went unnoticed. He quickly sent someone to Konoha. And Li Shang also found the branch of Tendo in Sanagakure. But as soon as he revealed his identity, the person in charge immediately said, "The headquarters wants you to return to Konoha." Li Shang could probably guess that these words came from Uchiha Itachi. After all, he had been missing for 7 years. "I will return soon." Li Shang took out a scroll and said, "Go to this place and find the buried cage, then hurry to Konoha to meet Uchiha Itachi." The buried cage? the person in charge couldn't quite understand. Didn't the cage just return to Sanagakure? Could it be fake? Just do as I say. Li Shang waved his hand. He wasn't worried about loyalty. Being the head of a branch meant he was definitely a core member of Tendo. 2 days later, in the Hokage's office in Konoha, Uchiha Fugaku read aloud in a serious tone, Sanagakure wishes to jointly hold a Chunin exam with ally Konoha, to showcase the talent of the young generation from both villages. And to offer my sincere blessings to my fellow cage. The joint Chunin exam was just a formality, it was more like a military exercise from the past. And it provided a platform for cooperation and exchange between the nobles of the Fire Country and the Wind Country. If the important figures were pleased, they could provide more missions. Shisui, what do you think? Uchiha Fugaku put down the scroll and asked by name. Currently, there were 5 people in Konoha's high ranks, including him. Shisui was in charge of the Konoha Police Department, and of course, his authority had been restored to its original level, with great power. Uchiha Itachi managed the Anbu, and Root had completely disappeared. The remaining 2 were Hokage advisors, given to Hyuga Hiyashi and Nara Shikaku. The former was from the Hyuga clan, which was on par with the Uchiha clan, and the latter represented the Ino Shika Cho trio. They almost wiped out the entire ninja clan. There were also Jiraiya and Tsunade. But after the funeral of the 3rd Hokage, Jiraiya left with Naruto, and Tsunade disappeared without a word. It's a good thing. Shisui thought for a moment and said, now that our Konoha is thriving, we can take advantage of Sanagakure and control their economy. Right. Nara Shikaku nodded and said, Sanagakure has always been poor due to its environment, and their economy is their fatal flaw. We can easily take them down without shedding blood. The changes in Konoha over the past 6 years had gradually shifted their thinking away from being ninjas. In the past, they would never have said such things. And all of this was thanks to one person. Uchiha Itachi sighed. Where did this guy go to have such a carefree time that not even a single word could be heard about him? It made him doubt his own intelligence network. In that case, let's agree to Sanagakure's request. Uchiha Fugaku said nonchalantly. Konoha was now strong and had no worries about Sanagakure playing any tricks. Because in the face of absolute strength, it was useless. Just then, urgent voices came from outside the door. Uchiha Itachi instantly appeared at the door, then opened it and asked, what happened? According to the rules of the Anbu, only the highest level events allowed Anbu members to act recklessly. Such as barging into high-level meetings in Konoha. Sanagakure's Anbu team brought back the critically injured Cage Rosa and Lady Bailuo's orders. What did you say? Uchiha Itachi showed an unusual emotional fluctuation. Are you sure it's Bailuo? As for Rosa, he subconsciously ignored him. Uchiha Fugaku suddenly stood up. And Shisui directly flashed in front of the Anbu member, grabbing his shoulder and asking, say it again. The Anbu ninja trembled under the scorching gaze of the 2 Uchiha and said, why yes. That's what they said. Only Hyuga Hiyashi and Nara Shikaku exchanged glances. They had never heard of Bailuo, nor did they know about Tendo. Tendo operated within the Anbu in secret, but they knew that members of the Anbu had code names. So who was this person? And the clever Nara Shikaku paused for a moment and blurted out, could it be that person? Konoha Shinobi Hospital, a highly secretive ward. Cage Gaara lay on the hospital bed, covered in bandages, unconscious. Uchiha Itachi activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and said, there are no traces of any ninjutsu. It wasn't that he didn't believe Li Shang, but the situation was too strange. After all, they had just received a request for the Chunin exams from Sanagakure. Considering the distance, these 2 events happened almost simultaneously. If this is the real Gaara, then the current cage of Sanagakure is an imposter. Shisui rubbed his chin and asked, did he give any special orders? No, Uchiha Itachi shook his head. I've already asked the Anbu messenger ninjas, but they know nothing. Li Shang has always been a very sensible person, so you don't need to worry too much. Uchiha Fugaku held his right arm and said, he must have his reasons for doing this. Although that's true, it's still too much to disappear for so long. Shisui complained with a look on his face, but deep down, he was quite happy. At least this guy was still alive and knew how to come back. Uchiha Itachi hesitated to speak, but after thinking about it, he decided to cooperate with Li Zhang's arrangements. Let the Chunin exams proceed as usual. Uchiha Itachi said calmly, no matter who the current cage is, they won't be able to pull any tricks in front of us Uchiha. Send someone to monitor the cage. Uchiha Fugaku looked at Gaara and said, apart from the medical ninjas in charge, no one should leak any information. I understand. Uchiha Itachi immediately arranged for the Anbu to do this. A rare hands-on approach. The next day, Uchiha Fugaku held a Jonin meeting. 1 month from now, we will hold a joint Chunin exam with Sanagakure. You can nominate the genin you want to participate. I recommend Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, and Haruno Sakura. Kakashi spoke without hesitation. Has Naruto returned? Uchiha Fugaku naturally knew the level of his own son. Participating in the exam would be a piece of cake. Naruto didn't need to worry either. In addition to Kakashi's guidance, there was also Jiraiya, one of the Sannin. He was also the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. In a real fight, Sasuke was no match for him. Unless he awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, not yet. Kakashi explained, but 1 month is enough to find his whereabouts. I will have the Anbu help, Uchiha Itachi said on the side. After all, Kakashi was originally from the Anbu. And Naruto was Sasuke's good friend and teammate. If he didn't come back, his younger brother wouldn't be able to participate in the exam. What about the others? Uchiha Fugaku asked again. Just like in the original story, Might Guy, Yuhi Kurenai, and others recommended the genin they brought. The only difference was that Sarutobi Asuma didn't lead the new generation of Inoshika Cho, but was replaced by Shisui. On the other side, Orochimaru was also discussing the Chunin exam list with Li Shang. According to the original plot, he sent the Toso, Saku, and Kin trio to assassinate Sasuke. At the same time, he had Yakushi Kabuto disguise himself as a Konoha shinobi to infiltrate the exam and gather information on Sasuke. But now Sasuke wasn't his target. To avoid suspicion from Konoha, just find a few people to participate. Orochimaru said casually, how about I go? Li Shang smiled and said, I'm the right age, and I also want to exchange and spar with the geniuses from the 5 great villages. Orochimaru glanced at him. At this moment, Li Shang seemed somewhat arrogant and youthful. Because he usually appeared so mature that Orochimaru often forgot his actual age. Then you help me keep an eye on 2 people. Orochimaru did not refuse, but instead made a request. The first one is Uchiha Sasuke, he is Uchiha Itachi's younger brother. If our plan fails, take him away. The second one is the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. If the information is correct, he should also be one of the genin at this time. Orochimaru had already defected before the 4th generation died. He was not aware of who the Nine Tails Jinchuriki was. But he knew about the Nine Tails incident orchestrated by Obito in the Akatsuki organization, and based on the timing analysis, it was not difficult to draw a conclusion. Even if it turned out to be wrong in the end, he wouldn't have much to lose. Li Shang nodded and asked, the requirement to participate in the exam is in the form of a ninja team. I plan to bring Kimimaro and Kaoru. What do you think? Orochimaru reminded, if you don't want to withdraw halfway, you may need to change someone. He was referring to Kimimaro. The bloodline disease had reached its worst stage. He could die at any moment. Orochimaru didn't care much about him, he only saw him as a special case for studying the bloodline disease. After all, almost all the containers he chose had bloodline limits. The probability of getting the disease. With me and Kaoru, there should be no problem persisting until the end of the exam. Li Shang sighed and said, besides, leaving him in Otogakure would make him very uncomfortable. You know what he wants, don't you? Pointless mercy. Orochimaru revealed a cold smile and said, after following me for so long, you still haven't gotten rid of this bad habit. That's why I can gain your trust, isn't it? Li Shang smiled and said. Orochimaru was actually unusually gentle towards him. But it was only because he had value. Orochimaru was ultimately a ninja who would do anything to achieve his goals. Li Zhang's thoughts were similar to how Senju Hashirama treated the Nine Tails. You are too strong, you need to be sealed. Orochimaru glanced at him, said nothing, and turned to leave. I wonder how strong Naruto and Sasuke are now. Li Shang was quite curious, but they must be stronger than in the original story. Naruto had the guidance of Kakashi and Jiraiya 6 years ahead of time. And Sasuke was not bad either, being taught by the Uchiha with the 3 Mangekyo Sharingan. Li Shang returned to Otogakure. He first told Kaoru about this matter, and she immediately became excited. She had been in Otogakure for too long and had long wanted to go out and have some fun. And after learning medical ninjutsu and sealing techniques for so long, she finally had the chance to compete with people of the same age. Then, Li Shang went to Kimimaro's ward. The two had a good relationship. After all, Li Shang was his doctor and Kimimaro couldn't ignore him, even if Orochimaru was the only one in his eyes. It seems Orochimaru-sama's plan is very successful. Kimimaro saw him and spoke, otherwise, you wouldn't have come back so early. I came back to bring people to participate in the Chunin exams. Li Shang explained. Kimimaro's eyes flashed with envy. He knew that with his current physical condition, there was basically no possibility of participating no matter what. I plan to participate, and you and Kaoru will be my teammates. Me? Kimimaro couldn't help but widen his eyes, causing the IV drip on his body to shake. Clearly, it was unexpected and pleasantly surprising news for him. Don't you want to go? If it can help Orochimaru-sama, even if I die in Konoha, I will go. Kimimaro exhaled and looked at Li Shang. After a moment, he said, thank you. He was a smart person and naturally understood the reason. The sky was filled with a blinding sun, making it impossible to look directly at. Li Shang stood on the wide streets of Konoha, looking around in all directions. The changes here exceeded his imagination. The once classic two-story Japanese-style buildings had been transformed into modern high-rises. Huge electronic screens were hung outside the buildings. At this moment, were scrolling back and forth on the screens. The top star of the ninja world, Uchiha Dong's new drama, The Dominant CEO and His Little Wife, will be broadcasted on Konoha TV's primetime slot tonight. This drama is sponsored by Tenjinten and Konoha's top comprehensive university, and tells the romantic love story between the CEO of Tenjinten, who suffers from face blindness, and a female college graduate from Konoha. Shang Lin heard the voice and glanced at it, commenting, Uchiha Dong looks pretty good, but he's too milky for my taste. Li Shang smiled. He also noticed the bus stop sign and the electric tracks on the ground, feeling a bit dazed. It seemed that the scrolls he left behind had been carefully read and perfectly executed by Shisui and the others. The first scroll contained some economic knowledge he had written down. Things like computers, advertising, and infrastructure. Although most of it was what he had seen online and in books, at least the ideas were forward-thinking. In addition to that, there were also developments in scientific ninja tools. Like going to the land of snow and obtaining technology for trains, railways, and chakra armor. The second scroll was about the organization and development of Tendo. The third scroll contained the location of his jade sky ring, but he told them not to open it unless they heard news of his death. Actually, it didn't matter if they opened it in advance. If the ring was there, it meant he hadn't come back. If it wasn't there, then it was even better, as it meant he had been resurrected again. You guys are ninjas from Otogakure, right? A girl dressed in a kimono walked out and said, I'm a member of Konoha's police department, here to welcome you. Shang Lin's eyes flickered and praised. Konoha truly deserves to be one of the 5 great villages, the service here is top-notch, and the sister is very beautiful. Having lived in Otogakure for a few years, her true nature had already been revealed. Combined with her understanding of Kimimaro and Li Shang, she acted very casually. Please follow me. The girl smiled, responding to Shang Lin's compliment. She led the 3 of them onto a tram. Shang Lin pushed open the window and looked at the tracks on the ground. This kind of thing was challenging her understanding. Even the calm Kimimaro couldn't help but take a look. You're the captain of the team, right? The girl took out a scroll with portraits of 3 people inside and explained, I need to confirm the number of participants in the exam, as there are always some who can't make it due to accidents. Li Shang nodded, indicating his understanding. He took a look at the girl's face. There were faint traces of ninjutsu. Ordinary genin or chunin wouldn't be able to perceive it. But Li Shang was different. Since learning Sage Mode, his perception ability had greatly improved. Even without activating it, he was much stronger than before. Thinking of the punishment from Konoha's police department, Li Shang couldn't help but smile. This girl was probably a member who had made a mistake and was forced to come out and receive them. Are there any other genin from Otogakure participating besides the 3 of you? No, alright. The girl put away the scroll and took out 3 sets of keys, saying, this is the hotel where you will be staying during the exam, and it is also the destination later. After Li Shang took the keys, she stopped speaking. Standing on the other side, she let out a sigh of relief, and the smile on her face disappeared, leaving only worry. Shang Lin showed a curious expression, not because she saw this scene, but because of the tram. She ran up to the girl and asked all sorts of questions. Like how the tram operated and how fast it could go. The girl immediately put on a professional smile and introduced herself. But Shang Lin only understood half of it. When it came to the principles of the tram system, she was completely confused. In the end, the girl said somewhat wearily, if you're interested, you can audit classes at Konoha's first comprehensive university. She might as well have said, you should read more books. Shang Lin didn't want to bother her anymore. The tram stopped. There was a bustling crowd in front of the hotel. All of them were ninjas from other villages. A shiny electronic screen stood in the center of the square, displaying a map of Konoha. It marked the location and time of the Chunin exams. Like Xianglin, many people were sincerely amazed by Konoha. But Li Xiang thought it was okay. He remembered that Boruto was even more exaggerated. It showed how rapidly technology was changing. He just made Konoha take this path earlier. And it was a Konoha that was far more united and visionary than in the original work. Your room number is marked on the key. The hotel provides 3 meals for free, but fighting in Konoha is prohibited. The girl reminded them, there are surveillance cameras everywhere. If a conflict occurs, the Konoha Police Department will arrive within 10 seconds and cancel both parties' qualification for the exams. Konoha is really amazing. Xianglin looked at the girl's departing figure and couldn't help but sigh. Conflicts between ninjas were commonplace. Not to mention the various grudges and disputes among the various ninja villages mixed together. For the Konoha Police Department to dare to do this, it undoubtedly required great courage. We don't need to cause unnecessary trouble. Li Xiang handed the room key to Xianglin and Kimimaro, saying, let's stay at the hotel for 2 days. Do you want to gather intelligence on the other opponents? Following the way of the ninja, Xianglin asked. Her role in the team was to perceive ninjas. Typically, a ninja team had a classic configuration of medical, perception, and combat roles. Li Xiang was responsible for medical duties, and Kimimaro naturally took on the combat role. With Kimimaro here, there's no need to waste time. Li Xiang casually explained. Kimimaro glanced at him. Although he had many bed scenes, he still understood Li Zhang's situation and knew that he had learned Sage Mode. In terms of strength, he was probably above himself. Okay. Xianglin nodded. She ran to her assigned room and immediately exclaimed in amazement. It was truly luxurious. Compared to it, Otogakure seemed like a poor and remote place. Although there were warnings from the Konoha Police Department, Li Xiang still heard a lot of fighting sounds these past 2 days. With nothing else to do, he used Sage Mode to perceive the situation. The battles usually ended quickly. After all, there were several pairs of Sharingan. So in this Chunin exam, the Uchiha clan was the first to become famous. On the 3rd day, Li Xiang, Kimimaro, and Xianglin arrived at the designated exam location. Konoha's first comprehensive university. Neither the Wind Shadow nor the Hokage were present. It was different from the original storyline. There was no plot where all the exam venues gathered together. They went straight to the 7th exam venue. The doors opened, and only 30 seats in the exam room were occupied. Li Xiang looked around and recognized many familiar faces. In the original work, the Chunin exam this time only had participants from Konoha Village and Sanagakure. The Cloud Shinobi Village, Kirigakure, and Iwagakure did not participate. On the contrary, the small ninja villages in the surrounding areas were quite active. This fully reflects the importance of the atmosphere group. Even the Hidden Grass Village, which had been plagued by Li Xiang and Shorin, did not escape. In these 6 years, all the sacrifices for Impure World reincarnation were former grass shinobi who had bullied Shorin and her mother. Li Xiang unexpectedly encountered someone in the exam venue. A ninja from Kirigakure. Although 6 years have passed, he still saw a few familiar faces. For example, Guren Suigetsu. Because all the attention was stolen by Li Xiang, Orochimaru didn't notice him back then. Perhaps it can be said that he noticed, but there is harm in comparison. With Li Xiang around, what is the point of having Guren Suigetsu? In a certain sense, it can also be considered a blessing in disguise. In addition to Guren Suigetsu, Li Xiang also saw the new generation of Ino Shika Cho. The facial features are too distinctive, it's hard not to recognize them. Nara Shikamaru looked like he had fought with 7 big girls last night, resting his chin on the desk and dozing off. Akamichi Choji was eating potato chips, making a loud crunching sound. Yamanaka Ino, on the other hand, seemed relatively normal. Perhaps it was because she hadn't seen Sasuke, so she didn't go crazy over him. Just then, a loud scream came from outside the window. Li Xiang turned her head and saw Sasuke. He was wearing the traditional attire of the Uchiha clan, with a cold expression. And around him, there were exclamations of admiration from the girls. It reminded Li Xiang of a video she had seen in her previous life. It was a scene of a top star coming to school, with a sea of people. Who is this? Li Xiang asked. Xianglin curled her lips and said, he's quite arrogant. Next to her, a genin from Konoha, a young boy with a proud look on his face, said, you outsiders don't understand anything. He is Uchiha Sasuke, the strongest graduate in the history of the ninja school, our leader. Strongest? Li Xiang showed confusion at the right moment. Aren't Uchiha Itachi and Kakashi from your Konoha supposed to be the strongest graduates? Cough cough. It seems like you have some understanding of our Konoha. The young man explained. Sasuke, the eldest, is still young and definitely can't compare to them now. But in these 6 years, his actions and mindset have already conquered all the students in the ninja school. How did he do it? With his fists? Of course not. He established a student council, leading us to fight against the school, striving for enough benefits, and organizing activities that we enjoy, such as shooting competitions, swordsmanship exchanges, and outdoor social events. Li Shang fell silent. This doesn't sound like something Sasuke would do at all. It's more like Shisui or Itachi's idea, even though it was because of him that Sasuke didn't defect. But people can change, and nature is hard to change. Besides the mission Li Shang gave him at the beginning, doing these things probably helped him cultivate his disguise. During their conversation, Ino and the others were also waving desperately by the window. And the little Sakura next to Sasuke was completely like a protective mother eagle. Li Shang didn't see Naruto. Perhaps he went to train with Jiraiya. Only after Sasuke entered the adjacent examination room did the voices slowly dissipate. He's a formidable opponent. Kimimaro finally spoke his first words today. His every move reveals excellent coordination and the ability to react at the fastest speed, proving his mastery of taijutsu. Because of his dead bone pulse, he can be considered a taijutsu nemesis, so he is sensitive in this aspect. At least being able to become the number 1 in the Konoha school, he shouldn't be too bad. Karen nodded in agreement. Just now, Sasuke's expressionless face made her feel that he was not someone to be trifled with. 2 words, very cool. Li Shang was about to say something when he suddenly looked up. Above them, a giant toad was leaping. Immediately after, accompanied by a scream, a yellow figure crashed directly onto the ground, raising a few meters high dust. Someone attacked? Shang Lin paused for a moment. The other candidates around were also making some noise. Phew. The boy with pineapple hair jumped up and spat out some dust, then said to the suddenly appearing Anbu, "It's me. It's me. Uzumaki Naruto, all losses will be recorded under your account," the Anbu said before disappearing. Tisk. That was quite a cool entrance. Li Shang couldn't help but smile. At least it was more impressive than being chased by a group of cows in the original. With the pineapple hair and cows, someone who didn't know would think it was some story about the neighbor next door. But falling from such a height without any injuries shows that his physical fitness is strong. Shang Lin, as a medical ninja, found it easier to analyze Naruto than Sasuke. The one who threw him down was probably his summoning beast. Kimimaro spoke up. Although I didn't see its appearance, it should be quite large in size. It's the Toad clan from Mount Myoboku, Li Shang explained. Kimimaro frowned at the explanation. Orochimaru's summoning beast comes from Ryuchi Cave. Both are equally famous, which proves that the boy just now is not ordinary. It seems that this exam is not as easy as he imagined. But fortunately, there is still Li Shang. It shouldn't delay Orochimaru's plan. Please return to your seats. The exam will begin in 10 minutes. Candidates who have not arrived will be considered as voluntarily giving up, the loudspeaker in the exam room announced. Li Shang also stopped talking. After a while, the door opened and 3 people walked in. Very unfamiliar, but their aura was good. Even though Li Shang was sitting in the back row, he could still feel the pressure in the air. The person in the lead started distributing the exam papers. The 2 people on the left and right activated their Sharingan and Byakugan, to Li Zhang's surprise. There was an instant gasp. Except for the new students from Konoha, the other ninja villages didn't pay much attention to theoretical knowledge. They were prepared to cheat, but if they could cheat under the Sharingan and Byakugan, they would have become Jonin long ago. The rules are simple: 100 questions, 100 points. There are 10 teams in the entire classroom, and only the top 3 teams with the highest scores will pass. Li Shang raised an eyebrow at the announcement. These rules are completely different from the original. But it seems reasonable. The education system in Konoha has undergone tremendous changes. Li Shang picked up the exam paper and quickly scanned through it. The content was rich. Ninja tools, flower arrangement, astronomy, geography, mathematics, and so on. It reminded Li Shang of the entrance exam for a certain website. Quite interesting. But the content was almost universally used by major ninja villages. There was no mention of the Will of Fire. Li Shang wasn't worried about Shang Lin. After all, he had been his teacher all along and taught him everything he needed to know. The only unknown was Kimimaro's level of knowledge. It would be quite funny if he failed at this stage. Li Shang quickly finished writing the exam paper and then flicked a droplet of water. Probably only he and Kimimaro could cheat under the Sharingan and Byakugan. At most, add Shikamaru and Ino. The water droplet reflected Kimimaro's exam paper. Li Shang couldn't help but shake his head. He really was a poor student. But considering his experiences, it was understandable. The orange sunlight shone through the window, illuminating the wooden leaf symbol on the office wall. The door was knocked. Uchiha Itachi snapped back to reality and saw a middle-aged ninja walking in. Wearing a red coat, a forehead protector with the character oil on it, and white long hair that reached his waist. He walked casually, his eyes darting around. Most people who saw him would probably think he was an old rogue or thug. In fact, that was correct. Uchiha Itachi thought of the legends he had heard and shouted, "Lord Jiraiya. Long time no see, you're getting more handsome." Jiraiya smiled and said, "You're almost as good looking as I was when I was young." Uchiha Itachi didn't know how to respond and ended up not showing any expression. Jiraiya shook his head, turned to Uchiha Fugaku, and said, "I've taken Naruto to the exam venue." "Thank you." Because the commotion was too loud, Uchiha Fugaku had already learned from the Anbu earlier. "Tsunade, any news?" "She doesn't want to come back." Jiraiya shook his head and said, "Because of hemophobia." Uchiha Fugaku fell silent for a moment and sighed, "What a pity." Without Orochimaru interfering, although Jiraiya took Naruto, he didn't persuade Tsunade to come back. In addition, the situation in Konoha was much better than in the original story. Whether Tsunade came back or not didn't make much difference. But Uchiha Fugaku still hoped to have a medical genius in charge. Tsunade's personality is like this, she prefers places with a lot of gambling. Jiraiya laughed and said, "She wouldn't be happy if she came back to Konoha. For now, we don't need to worry about Tsunade." Uchiha Fugaku brought up the matter of Li Shang and said, "The current Kazekage is fake. He might pose a threat to Konoha through the Chunin exams, so I called you back." "Is that so?" Jiraiya looked surprised and said, "There are very few ninjas who can kill a Kage. It's probably a dangerous person." Uchiha Fugaku nodded slightly. The fourth Kazekage, Rasa, was already considered one of the top Jonin-level powerhouses. Although Konoha was not afraid, it was inevitable that they would be affected. If the cost of winning was to destroy half of Konoha, then it would be meaningless. Just then, the door was opened again. Shisui walked in and said, "The written test is over. The next test will take place in the Death Forest." "Is there anything else?" Uchiha Fugaku looked up and said, "This kind of small matter shouldn't require you to come in person." "It's Uchiha Lang." Shisui took out a scroll and said, "He said we should take action after the second test and gave us a match schedule." "Where is he?" Uchiha Itachi leaned forward and asked. "Haven't seen him." Shisui explained, "Just like the previous times, he disappears after delivering the information. By the time we notice, there's no time left." After Uchiha Fugaku finished reading the scroll, he said, "Itachi, Anko will be the proctor for the second test." Uchiha Itachi was stunned and asked, "What does that have to do with the proctor?" "Lang said the target of the Kazekage is you." Uchiha Fugaku finished speaking and laughed, "He's quite good at choosing people." Jiraiya, who was eavesdropping, waved his hand and said, "Let me know if there's anything. I'll go play at the Konoha Police Department." With a bang, he disappeared. Uchiha Fugaku asked in confusion, "What is he doing at the Konoha Police Department?" Shisui said with a strange expression, "Lord Jiraiya cares a lot about the members of the patrol team, especially those beautiful girls." Thinking about his legendary eccentricity, Uchiha Fugaku coughed and said, "Don't ever tell him the truth." When Li Shang left the classroom, he heard the fluctuating screams again. He looked towards the source of the sound and sure enough, it was Sasuke. But this time, Naruto was also there. Compared to Sasuke's calm demeanor, Naruto was much more active. He waved his hand while walking and shouted, "Thanks everyone for your support." Li Shang remembered the concerts from his previous life. This sentence should be changed to, "Thanks everyone for buying tickets." Shang Lin ignored the commotion nearby and looked through the exam rules, saying, "The second exam will take place in the Forest of Death. We will gather at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, with only half an hour to wait." Li Shang had seen it before. The rules were the same as in the original work. Holding the Heaven and Earth coiling scrolls was considered passing, but before starting, they could only randomly choose one scroll. It was another beautiful day. Even though it was only 6 o'clock, the sky was already bright. Li Shang immediately saw Uchiha Itachi standing at the front. He whispered, "That is Orochimaru's target. I'll go inform him while we have time." Kimimaro and Shang Lin nodded. Li Shang suddenly exclaimed in surprise, "I left my ninja tools at the hotel, wait for me." He quickly turned around and hurriedly left. Uchiha Itachi glanced at him. He didn't notice any traces of ninjutsu. Orochimaru had come with the genin from Otogakure to participate in the exams. But he would only officially attend during the third exam. The first 2 exams were just preliminaries and didn't interest the audience. Li Shang transformed into a ninja from Sanagakure and smoothly met Orochimaru at their hotel. You said Uchiha Itachi is the chief examiner for the second exam? Orochimaru narrowed his eyes and licked his lips. His original plan was to start during the third exam. Because before that, he didn't have any opportunities. Under normal circumstances, Uchiha Itachi would not be the chief examiner for the first 2 exams. And Orochimaru couldn't just break into the Anbu, it was too dangerous. So the best choice was during the third exam in the arena. Without any traps, Konoha wouldn't expect him to make a move. A perfect opportunity for an ambush. At the same time, they could also coerce the nobles from the Wind and Fire countries who were present as a bargaining chip for their escape. But this unexpected situation made Orochimaru ponder. His target was Uchiha Itachi, not Konoha. The second exam is in the Forest of Death, and there's only Uchiha Itachi alone. Perhaps this is our chance. Orochimaru made a quick decision and said, change the plan. You continue to participate in the exam and avoid arousing suspicion. The Forest of Death. Uchiha Itachi glanced at the time and said, distribute the scrolls. I'll be waiting for you at the central tower. A team of 3 who arrive together will be considered as passing. In the next moment, his body turned into several crows and disappeared. The Anbu ninja immediately distributed the scrolls to each team. We have the Heaven Scroll. Shang Lin collected the scroll and said, with their strength, it didn't matter who held it. Kimimaro walked silently at the front without saying a word. Li Shang and Shang Lin followed him and quickly ventured deep into the Forest of Death. The 3 of them didn't bother concealing their presence. After about 15 minutes, Shang Lin spoke up, there are 3 on the left and 3 on the right.